ambulance, please. He's bleeding, he's going to be dying. Oh my God.
Sunday, 15th of January, 2023. Residents of this Huddersfield neighbourhood are waking up to an unexpected scene. Last night, at around 11:30, a 33-year-old man was stabbed in his home by unknown assailants.
I've been called out to an attempted murder scene in Huddersfield where a male has been stabbed in the abdomen. His wife and 3 children were at the home address when this happened, and his wife has stated that there's been a knock at the rear door. She's heard a commotion in the kitchen, and then a male has appeared in the living room and said, "If you give me your phone, you won't get hurt." So she's given a mobile phone to the suspect, who's then left via the back door, which is the way they came in, and gone. And when she's gone into the kitchen, she's seen that her husband has been stabbed in the stomach, and she's ran to her neighbours to call for help.
Scene investigators are focusing on the house where the stabbing took place. They're examining inside the property, the backyard, and the front garden where the victim collapsed.
Neighbours have brought out blankets and cushions to try and look after him until paramedics arrive. On the way to hospital, he has gone into cardiac arrest. He's been given CPR. They have managed to get him back with a faint pulse, and he has been operated on in hospital, but his prognosis is still not good.
Now, crime scene manager Jasmine White and her team must look for evidence to try and piece together exactly what happened.
It's not like there's been a lot of disturbance, is it really, apart from the crockery?
There's not much visually.
One broken plate, one broken pint glass, and is that what we got?
Yeah, that's it, isn't
That's
it?
an ashtray, isn't it? Did you think there had been 3 people in then?
We know that one person has. Anybody else, don't know.
It's proving a challenging scene to process.
There's hardly any blood in there. It's literally like, it's not like blood spatters or anything, so it's like probably a single stab. But all we've seen is this, isn't it? And maybe that might be dried blood that's like curled up. This person's got a really nasty stab wound to the abdomen, so much so that their internal organs were protruding out of it when they were found by paramedics. But we've only found 3 or 4 spots of blood at the address. So that would lead me to believe that his blood loss is internal, and that's why it's not at the address.
They test a small amount of what could be blood on the lounge floor.
What I'm thinking is if we could photograph it where it is with an arrow, test it and then swab it.
It's positive for blood. It may or may not belong to the suspect. We know that the victim's injured, but we don't know if the suspects have any injuries. So I'm going to take a swab from here, and it's known that the suspect has been in this room.
They're the only bits of blood we can see. We've not seen any on this door coming from the kitchen into the living room. We've not seen any blood on the external door into the kitchen. There's just very little blood in the premises at all.
The CSI team examines the kitchen floor. Any footwear marks could identify the attackers.
I don't know.
I just feel like it's the only thing you'd get. So if we didn't just roll an Esler here, it'd be... I feel like that's a fair thing to do.
It is just this area here, isn't it, I suppose, to start with.
What's on? Is there some that stood up? No. Just
Is there what they can do with it chemical enhancement-wise?
it's either take it up and send it off, or try powder it.
Outside, A specialist search team is looking for the murder weapon.
We're searching the streets and surrounding areas for any items that may have been discarded by the suspects. We're going to be searching all streets, all pavements, all gardens, all bins, all open areas, all drains, anywhere where any item could have been discarded or concealed. To understand the significance of the items that we are either looking for or we come across, which may become more relevant as time goes on. We're less than 24 hours after this incident, so the search teams that have been briefed will be keeping an open mind and looking for anything that's out of place that can help the investigation team.
More gloves inside the bottom of this tyre.
While forensics remain at the crime scene, detectives are trying to establish a motive for such a vicious and violent attack.
I've got to consider whether we were looking at an actual targeted attack, a random attack, or even a burglary gone wrong, or potentially mistaken identity and they picked the wrong address. And I've got to establish, through hypotheses, which one of those is the correct course of action, what's the motive for this offence. Identifying a suspect early doors will allow me to do that, and that's where the forensic side comes in.
Meanwhile, a man's life hangs in the balance.
He has had 21 blood transfusions and is still classed as really poorly and could die. It's likely it will become a murder inquiry.
It's the day after an attempted murder in Huddersfield. Forensic teams are retrieving evidence from the crime scene, knowing the 33-year-old victim is unlikely to survive.
So far, the search team have found a number of latex gloves on the route we think the suspects have taken. They've found a knife here in the bush. Whether it's the knife we're interested in or not, it's still good to me that the search team are finding the items to show that they're searching properly, they're doing what is required, and we'll just keep going until we're satisfied the scene's done.
Well, that bit pushes all the way up, mate, outside.
I'm just thought I'd bring it to your attention. In relation to the latex gloves, right, you two. Right. There's a glove here somewhere, and there's a glove under this BMW.
Okay.
So there are two more gloves.
Inside the house, CSIs are working through where the suspects might have walked and what they might have touched.
The back door being open?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so it's insecure. So
Yeah.
they've just walked in.
No, they've knocked.
Oh, right, okay.
She's heard a knock
Yeah.
at 11:30 at night. Then next thing she's known, she's heard a commotion. So whether they've knocked and pushed the way in, knocked, he's let them in. One person she's seen's been in.
Yeah.
In this case, as it stands at the moment, because we've got no idea who the suspects are, we're going to try absolutely everything at the scene. It's quite limited because the contact that the suspects had with surfaces at the scene, the victim, that seems to have been over quite quickly, according to the female witness. So we're trying to think of anything that we could look at to find the suspect or get a link to the suspect. We're going to be swabbing the inside of the kitchen door handle. That's for cellular DNA, in case the suspects touch that on their way out of the house. Obviously, he's gone through there and there's no handle.
Yeah. What, powder in the old lot?
Well, we could try, yeah. The witness has stated that that suspect may have been wearing gloves, so there may be no chance of getting DNA on that door handle, but we have to try now, otherwise that chance is gone. We're going to be looking at the kitchen floor and the living room floor for footwear using something called ESLA, which is electrostatic lifting apparatus. It's not something we use often, but it does lift the dust that's been disturbed on more shiny surfaces. We pass an electrical current through a very thin black gel with a metal backing. Look at that. And it literally sucks to the floor and lifts any dust that's been disturbed on the floor. So we've preserved the floor using stepping plates. So we're hoping that if there's any footprints from the suspects, we may be able to get them with this. If not, it's a non-destructive technique, and then we can move to powdering the floor and see if that works.
I'm just powdering outside of this door for any potential fingerprints or footwear marks. It is slightly damp in places, which makes it really difficult to actually powder. But with the information with the suspects sort of wearing gloves, not looking for glove marks, I'm looking for any sort of marks, whether it's latex marks or even fingerprints, but I'm not seeing a great deal on here, unfortunately. And there don't appear to be any footwear marks either, just in case they are. The suspect could have kicked the door.
Sadly, it doesn't look like it's lifted anything, but it's a really useful technique to try because it is non-destructive, so we've not harmed anything by doing it. Tomorrow, a CSI is going to have to come back and we're going to try and powder this floor and the floor in the living room.
Overnight, the victim's condition significantly worsens.
Sadly, our victim, Khalfan Seif, passed away at 19:52 hours last evening at HRI, so we are now in the throes of a murder inquiry.
Khalfan Seif was a husband and father of 3. He was just 33 years old. The identity of his killers and their motive is unknown.
The offenders were caught on CCTV, and at 23:07 hours we can see 3 suspects, which we believe are males, walking into the rear of the actual attacked premises. 2 are on foot, 1 is on a push bike, and 1 we can say is in possession of an umbrella.
And the lad that seems to be riding the bike on both occasions, before and after, is a lad wearing grey jogging bottoms. And that bike is dropped beyond the scene, isn't it? So further up the hill.
At 23:14 hours, we get all 3 suspects running away on foot, so none of them on a bike.
And that's all we are. I mean, we haven't got them anywhere else. We need to concentrate on tracking and tracing from.
The bike, which was discarded in the alleyway behind the victim's house, has been recovered. It could become a key piece of forensic evidence.
Once the bike and umbrella had been located by officers, that they seemed a little bit out of place. They were very close to the scene. So I was contacted and deployed CSI straight out to them to see if we can glean some forensic evidence and also to preserve them because it was raining. And I've asked them to complete some DNA sampling of the handlebar grips and also on the saddle of the bike and fingerprint it. This is the black umbrella that was found next to the bike, and CSI were tasked with, again, obtaining DNA samples from it.
Also found in the alleyway was a mobile phone and a pair of purple latex gloves.
The victim's wife states during the incident that one of the offenders was wearing purple latex gloves, and she'd also had her mobile phone stolen during the incident. So it's possible that these latex gloves have been discarded by the offenders as they've been fleeing the scene. The umbrella and the purple gloves, I think they'd be items that would be suitable for fast-track DNA submission. Excellent. In order to try and identify your suspects. The bike, we're not sure if it's perhaps been stolen in a defence, it belongs to somebody else. Have all 3 of the suspects perhaps ridden the bike at some point during that day or prior to the offence? So my concern with the bike handles and the seat was that the potential of getting a mixed profile was greater, and that wouldn't necessarily have been suitable for loading to the database to get you a name.
It's not going to give me that quick hit that I'm looking for.
Probably today, I think, given now that we're dealing with a murder inquiry and thinking long term when it gets to court, that we should get imaging done. I also think some drone footage from above, so that you'll be able to.
You can get the plan. That's the address. That's where the bike was covered.
Yeah. They can do some specialist photography which will encompass the entire scene, a 360 view of the interior and exterior of the property, and some drone footage that will assist showing the offender's route from the scene.
Hiya, Sarge. Yes, we've got an item here which could be blood, might not be, and we know the suspects have been rooting around in these bushes.
Just down the road, the specialist search team has a new area to investigate after a CCTV breakthrough.
We just seize and secure for now, including that item there as and when we get a chance. Is that all right? I believe the suspects involved in this incident have run behind me along this path, and the green area, the overgrowth to that side is of interest to us. So we've put a scene on here, and we are putting steps in place now to try and get our teams to be able to search this as a matter of priority.
What have you found so far?
So far today, we've found more gloves. We've just found a tea towel just over there which has got red staining on it. It's something we can't dismiss without further examination. There's 3 blister packs of tablets that all look fresh and out of place. Maybe something to do with this, maybe not. But we'll probably take them anyway, and anything else we find here, Cat.
We've got CCTV on the right and the left from both premises, and the premises up the road up there, so we've got 3 angles covered, so our next plan is to go across the road, over the bridge.
So if you get anything significant, if you feed that back into me, I'll literally follow you. Wherever the suspects go, I'll follow you with the scene.
We've just looked over the bridge and noticed this towpath that runs secluded down where the river is, which is a perfect opportunity to make an escape away from CCTV, rather than going into a city centre which will be covered in CCTV. So we're going to go to that pub round the corner and see if it's, because that'll establish if they've gone by.
It's quite clear that, isn't it? Apparently they've got cameras that some of them do cover the canal. So if we were going to get people running by, you'd be able to see them running.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
Next, detectives target a nearby factory, which has more CCTV covering the canal path.
Right, I've seen there's a camera outside of that building.
Yep.
Have you got that camera? Is that the path?
That's the path.
Do you know where that comes out of?
I believe that comes out like college.
We're just now in the process of downloading approximately 5 hours worth of footage to cover that time period between 8 and 2 o'clock in the morning, because they could have come that way and they could have made the escape that way. It's right next to the canal, so if they were going to discard anything, such as a weapon, it's a perfect opportunity to discard evidence. And hopefully, when we view it, it will assist us further in which way these suspects have gone. We're getting 2100, yeah.
To midnight.
As evening approaches, the investigation takes a significant leap forward with an unexpected tip-off from a member of the public.
We've had a numerous piece of intelligence today. The main one being we've had 2 brothers named by a person. The first one is an Aman Ansar and his brother, which is Sahil Ansar. Now they both live at Springdale Avenue, which is above the address, about 100 yards maximum on the other side of the road. And where the bike's been left, there's an alley with a little track that cuts through to that house. They are known to us for possess drugs, possess offensive weapon, bladed article, aggravated burglary, and they match the physical description given. So at 15:28 hours today, I designated them as suspects for the murder.
Senior Investigating Officer Damien Roebuck starts planning his arrest strategy for when the 2 brothers are apprehended.
As we are dealing with an offence of a knife crime, we have to get the actual suspects assessed by our critical incident managers. Now, they're trained to make sure the right resources go and make those arrest inquiries, whether that be a firearms officer, an officer with suitable PPE, or an officer who has a taser. And then from there, we can move that forward, and bear in mind where they're arrested from, that will then become a further scene, which will be locked down, and will need forensics and a search team going through it.
Two brothers have been declared suspects in the murder of 33-year-old Kaufan Seif in Huddersfield. The father of three was stabbed to death in his own home with his wife and children in the next room. A manhunt is underway to find his killers. While a motive for this vicious attack remains unclear, forensics are at the forefront of the investigation. They're fingerprinting as much of the inside of the house as possible.
What I'm going to do now, I've found the inside of the doors, photograph them as they are, and then I'm going to put some of these location arrows onto the map, so I'm going to actually photograph and recover. Just sticking these scaled labels, we write down a gravity arrow on it, just so when it actually goes to the fingerprint bureau that they can say which way up an actual fingerprint is. What I'm after is of how the suspect has got in here. So if they've opened the door up, where are the suspects likely to have handled or likely to have touched? What I'm going to do now is lift the same marks using an acetate sheet and some 3M tape, what we use. It's like special tape for lifting fingerprint marks. You see a little bit of detail around here. These marks are still very visible on the door, which has an indication, it's not guaranteed, but it has an indication that it's an old mark. So I'm presuming these aren't the suspect's marks. I've got quite a few fingerprints from the inside of the rear door, a couple off the lounge/kitchen door, and one from the kitchen door frame. It's very important to find all sorts of forensics in a case like this. Every bit of evidence goes a long way.
The fingerprints will be sent to the Identification Bureau. Overnight, the investigating team has been reviewing the CCTV evidence.
So initially we just had the footage that showed them running away from the scene. We didn't know where they'd gone. We obviously were aware that at some stage prior to the offence had been in the Hall Avenue area. So they've downloaded some really key footage at the side of Hall Avenue which shows them running then down out onto the main road. One of these suspects here has got a rucksack in his hand. Now, jumping back as they run down Bewley Road, that backpack's actually on his back, so he's taking it off his back at this point, which made us think, is he going to discard anything here? And this area is quite overgrown, so we think it's happened off camera, but they are sort of lifting the bag to the front as if they're going to take something out. And that's this area here where we've recovered those tablets and some trainers that seemed out of place, quite new. So we know after they run from Hall Avenue across St Thomas Road, and we've got footage here on a commercial premises that show them at 18 minutes past 11 just running very briefly, three figures there running around the back of this building. Then we capture them a very short time later going onto the canal path, which obviously is an ideal place to go. A lot of water down there. We haven't recovered the knife used in the offence yet, so that has become now a focus of our attention. So the priority today is to follow that footpath which comes out near Kirklees College. So we've got about 16, 17 officers out today doing trial of that area.
While the investigating team continues its CCTV trawl, the specialist search team deploys its marine unit to the canal.
I've come here with underwater search. We have had a recce, had a walk through the area. We've obviously got the river to us left, we've got the canal to us right, which is obviously going to be quite challenging, and we've got the land, we've got the bushes. So we've just come up with a strategy of how we're going to tackle this area to search it for the items that we're after. The dive unit have a number of options available to them. They obviously have the boats, they can wade, they can go under the water. It'll all depend on how deep the water is, how fast flowing it is, to what technique they use.
It's not long before the team finds an object of interest.
So this is the knife that's been recovered by the dive team. The actual knife is bent, which suggests to us it's been used for something that's caused the metal to bend on that. But that's quite specific with the speckle design and the name on the knife. But I'll feed that back into the investigation team. Sometimes we just find knives and we can't explain why. There may be another 5 or 10 in here, we'll see.
And then another discovery.
The reason I brought you is there's just a glove to your left-hand side there, and maybe I'd not pull that importance through without these two items here. Now just be careful, this wall's really slippery. So we've got the rucksack here, and I know we're close to a college, but we've got a rucksack, we've got a black item of clothing, it looks like it's got some writing on it. We've got these two, we've got another rucksack in the water, we've got the glove. The dive team will use their ladders to get it down, and if you want, they'll bag it, but we're going to have a stack of exhibits to pass over.
Seize it, and then at the end of when we finish,
I'll ring you.
Just hand it out to me, and then I'll book it in when we get that.
With the two brothers, Aman and Sahil Ansar, on the run, police have entered their home address to look for evidence to link them directly to the attack. The house is just a few doors down from the crime scene.
We'll liaise with the forensic manager in relation to a forensic strategy, and then we come and conduct a methodical search of the premises, looking for the items that the detectives told us are relevant. So on this occasion, we're looking for a knife that's been used in the offence, mobile phones, specific clothing that we've got on CCTV for the suspects, and any other items basically that may be of relevance to the investigation. Has Richard photographed it?
Yes, I have it. They had to be swabbed by CSI.
They find a number of items of clothing that could be linked to the crime.
Say that one now because it's got a big knife on
Yeah,
front.
it'd be really obvious, wouldn't it? And it's too small, wouldn't it? Retrieve it, and then when we've finished in here, we'll go out and see if we can identify them outside.
Yeah, I'll get it out.
The search also yields mobile phones, SIM cards, and passports, indicating the brothers are still in the country.
But it's ringing, isn't it?
Yeah. There's more black copper style jackets than what we've got.
We'll finish this address, pass the exhibits to the exhibits officers, and then we'll review where we're at in terms of the other scenes that we've got outstanding. But we're looking in a better position today, so we've seized in excess of 20 exhibits, which have been subject to CSI examination. So these two.
Right. Sound. No, we're just getting some tops and having all big buffers.
Back at HMET, SIO Damien Roebuck is getting an update from Area Forensics Manager Kate Whitehead on the items that were sent off for fast-track DNA testing.
Yeah. So, Damien, I'm still waiting on the results to come back for the rework of the DNA. I've been told not to hold out hope. When I've spoken to the scientists, they sampled one of the purple latex gloves. The profile from the gloves is not going to be suitable for loading to the database.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that it will generate as a name.
Okay.
The umbrella, part of the top of the handle, and a button on the umbrella. So they're the areas that they sampled on the umbrella. The profile from the umbrella is poorer than what we're getting off the gloves.
With no forensic breakthrough, they come up with a new plan.
The bicycle, at the moment, this is probably maybe my strongest sort of feeling about what we should go with next. But I'd perhaps like just to make some further inquiries first. So the first thing I'd be interested to know is, on the CCTV, does it look like it's always Grey Joggers man that is on the bicycle, or do they pass it between themselves?
Okay.
Have we recovered any CCTV from Springdale Avenue yet? And is the bike seen to come or go from that premises? As in, trying to establish whether the bike belongs to them and that household, or whether it's perhaps been stolen from somewhere else, or they've picked it up from somewhere.
What I can say is we're on our way out to actually cover that CCTV. Plan B, and they're going to take it straight down to imaging and see if we can start viewing straight away.
Okay, that would be excellent. I think you would probably end up with a mixed profile, as we discussed before, and again that might only be suitable for direct comparison, but unlike the gloves, you have definitely got that offender coming to the scene on the bike.
Yeah, I agree.
At the canal, a specialist police team is now searching an area highlighted by the CCTV evidence found after the attack. One of the suspects is seen to throw the latex gloves he is wearing into the water.
We've looked at the CCTV from this premises, and you can see it. The suspect discards it into the canal.
They land about 4 foot inside on the water, but they float. And then they float, they come to the side, and they start coming down. There's a drain, and if they've gone down that, it might have flowed into the river at the other side, which is where the dive team are starting tomorrow. So all I'm going to do is just have a look here, see if I can work out where they're likely to have gone.
The race is on to find the glove before any key forensic material, such as blood or DNA, is eroded by the water.
The task is quite a massive task. Depends on what we can get back from that glove, with it being in water and the elements with the cold weather.
It's day 4 of the investigation into the murder of father of 3, Khalfan Seif, in Huddersfield. Overnight, snow has fallen, making the forensic team's job even harder.
I know for a fact here they don't throw anything over, so I can see that. But round that little corner there...
While the dive team continues to search the canal bed for a potential murder weapon, other members of the specialist search team are combing an area of waste ground.
In the waste ground behind us, we've just got this 4 separate latex gloves. There is another one, same type of latex gloves that was found in the water, covered by the dive team, and a small black bag, which is quite similar to the ones we've got intelligence about.
I'm going to take them back, and then we'll get booked in by exhibits officer, and then they'll just decide what's going to happen with it on the forensic strategy.
A number of similar latex gloves have been found. Forensics are now examining one from the alley behind the victim's house.
The gloves are down a shallow grate within the alleyway. They appear to be inside out, as if they've been taken off and deposited there.
They'll get each of them out, spread them out evenly, do a search on the one side, then look at the reverse side. So it's important to make sure we look both inner and outer surfaces before we progress.
Forensic Enhancement Officer Gary Banks is looking for partial prints, known as ridge detail.
Fingerprints can fluoresce depending on types of sweat, and the high intensity light sources stimulate those sweat particles. The reason why we cut them open is it enables me to examine them in a lot better detail, and I can have a closer look at each of the tips of the fingers. And also it's important to look at the lower edges, because people tend to use their fingers also to be able to pull the gloves on. I've examined, and there's no ridge detail I can see. The next process is vacuum metalled deposition, and it uses gold and zinc. I will heat up the gold, which will vaporize into the vacuum and coat itself onto the gloves, and then go onto the zinc metal, and that will put a second coating on. Hopefully, if there's any ridge detail there, we'll be able to see. There's actually a couple of minute ridges, but it's not going to warrant us sending it through to the Bureau for an expert to look at. So we'll continue on with the next process.
Back at headquarters, there's been another tip-off about a third suspect.
As a result of community intelligence, a further name has come into the inquiry. It's linked to the two Ansar brothers who I designated as suspects on Monday. I'm currently looking into that individual to establish where he fits into the investigation and whether I'm actually going to upgrade that person to a suspect. The community intelligence that we've received over the last couple of days is that this wasn't a random attack. The suspects more likely have targeted the address, but we're not sure of the motive and whether that was a burglary gone wrong or whether it was targeting the individuals inside.
A specialist search team is now at the victim's house, looking for clues to specifically link the victim to the suspects, who are still on the run.
We've gone, mate. What's up? End of body-worn footage.
There's several items that would be of interest to the investigation team. Obviously, mobile phones that yield crucial information. And then, due to the nature of the assault, any beladed articles, outstanding weapons that could have been used during that assault.
I've done all this bit.
Any items really that could show us a lifestyle or indeed point in the direction of some kind of motive as to why the attack's taken place. We've got 4 items that have been recovered from the kitchen area, a couple of mobile phones that may be of interest, a SIM card in a phone box, but that is pretty much it really. A bit disappointed, not as much as we thought we'd find.
The investigating team is getting an update about the possible whereabouts of the two brothers.
The suspects may have fled to an address in Rastrick, which is a neighbouring village to Kirklees. Now, that intelligence came through this morning. We've done some work with telecoms inquiries. The inquiries we've received have resulted in evidence and potential data that the offenders and the suspects were at that address at approximately 23:30 hours last night. We're now looking at getting a further search warrant to arrest the suspects. So it's a fast-moving investigation, but hopefully we can get them into custody as soon as possible.
Please, get your hands where we can see them. No. Stay where you are, stay where you are. Keep your hands where we can see them.
Right, so right, push past him. Keep your hands where I can see him. Watch that door.
Please, anyone else in it? I've got cuffs.
All right, cuffs on.
Please, stay where you are now. Do not move. Do not move, stay where you are.
Just a few hours later, the brothers are arrested by firearms officers at the flat in Rastrick, which is the home of one of their friends.
Get down on the floor! Get down on the floor! Subjects, on your front now.
Right, we'll keep.
What's your name?
Sahil.
Yeah, Sahil.
Right,
what's your last name?
Ansar.
Sahil
Second subject.
Ansar.
Okay, you're under arrest, mate. On suspicion of murder, okay. Do you understand? Right, clear.
Subject secure.
What's your name? You what? A man what? A man Ansar.
You're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't say anything but it may harm your defence if you're not mentioned when questioned, something which later line in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Do you understand?
Subjects are under arrest.
The third suspect is also tracked down and located at student accommodation in Sheffield.
5 minutes ago I was informed that we've just made the third arrest for the outstanding suspect in the murder of Khalfan Saif. Wahab Saif has been arrested in Sheffield. We'll be transporting him back up to West Yorkshire to continue with the investigation and interviews in the morning.
3 suspects are now in custody for the murder of 33-year-old Khalfan Saif in Huddersfield.
Khalfan Saif has been murdered. CCTV inquiries led the police to suspect you are one of those males that attended his address. So are you responsible for the murder of Mr. Saif?
No comment.
While they are continuing to be questioned by detectives, their mobile phones have been seized and taken to the digital forensics unit.
Patrick, we've got this phone that's come from suspect who's in custody at the moment. It's a matter of urgency. If we can get a full download done on it, as much as data as possible, then we'll get it back to OIC for review.
This is Apple iPhone. It came to us powered on without the PIN code, and we will try to extract data that could be later on used as evidence. Okay, data extraction of the mobile phone gives us the access to the images, videos, messages, all of the third-party apps that are inside of the phone, and all of the location data that are stored in this device.
Out of the 24 phones seized as part of this investigation, the team manages to get data from 18 of them. This is passed on to the investigating team.
There are at least one device which we've got, which we believe that one of our defendants was using at the time or just after the offence. That device has material on there which links into what a witness has told us about Wahab's safe, in that Wahab approached him, asked him if he could stay within his student property to keep his head down. And then when Wahab came to see our witness, the witness asked what was happening, what was going on, why this strange behaviour, to which Wahab has shown him a mobile phone. And our witnesses have been able to recount that the phone had a picture of a Huddersfield-based newspaper, and that the headline of that article it was looking at mentioned the word murder. Within that device, which was seized from Wahab, we've been able to look at the websites that have been activated, and within that are several hits of which it catalogues how the investigation moved on.
After hours of CCTV viewing, there's a major leap forward. The investigating team finds footage of the suspects taking off their face coverings after the attack. They're also seen throwing the gloves that were found on the waste ground earlier in the day. The two are now definitively linked. It's a key find ahead of the custody interviews with the Ansar brothers.
We interview Aman Ansar with a solicitor at Huddersfield Police Station. Throughout the interview, he pretty much gave a no comment to all questions asked.
Can you tell me any information whatsoever about how he came to die?
No comment.
Have you had any involvement in it?
No comment.
The purpose of the interview was to basically get an account from him, find out where he was at the time, who he was associating with, and also to ask him how he knows everybody involved.
This took place on Saturday the 14th. Can you tell me where you were on Saturday the 14th, at any stage?
No problem.
Were you with your brother, Sahil?
No problem.
Khalfan, Saif, were you friends with him?
No problem.
Were you enemies with him?
No problem.
We also wanted to know what links he had to the addresses and the items that have been found, such as the bike, the rubber gloves and the umbrella. He was asked if he would be forensically linked to the victim himself or the victim's home address.
Will we find your DNA on his body?
No comment.
Is there any reason whatsoever why your DNA would be inside that house?
No comment.
Following on from that, we move into the CCTV. He was shown the compilation, and throughout that process he looked extremely nervous, particularly at the point where the suspects go behind the warehouse and they start to demask.
Have you noticed that these individuals seem to think they're safe at this point and that they're all pulling hoods up, taking masks down? Is that you?
Comment.
Did you not realise there was a CCTV camera there?
No comment.
He was physically shaking and he was having to hold his own arm to stop himself from shaking.
As the broader evidential picture begins to build, at the fingerprint lab, the seized latex glove undergoes a process called gentian violet.
Gentian violet is a wet process where we coat the actual surface of the gloves and it attaches to any fatty acids which are secreted from fingerprints. Well, it's interesting. The GV appears to have brought some rich detail in the palm area and one of the fingers. So my next course of action is to get the mark photographed as soon as possible and get it through to the Fingerprint Bureau.
The suspect's friend's flat in Rastrick, where they were arrested, is being forensically searched.
Yeah, can you just look under there for me? Lift it. Oh, there's that glove there. Yeah, we've got a knife under here as well. Under the sofa in the front room, and we've lifted it up. There's a machete, which is about 50 to 60 centimetres long. That's been in a sheath. And then there's also a black builder's glove under there. When the CSI has taken the photos and the flash has lit up the blade, you can see that has been wiped with something. So there's some sort of liquid residue the length of the blade in 2 or 3 places, as if it's been wiped off or an attempt's been made to clean it.
I think it's been wiped.
Yes, it has been wiped. You see the smears, yeah.
Three men are being held on suspicion of the murder of Khalfan Seif in Huddersfield. At the address where the Ansar brothers were detained, there have been a number of important finds.
A warrant was executed here overnight with the premises and started a search in this room, and almost immediately located a black rucksack. Contained within that rucksack several items. There's been most notably black zombie knife. It's in a sheath. There's a pair of black tracksuit bottoms, and then there's a balaclava in there as well. On the search of the sofa, found a black puffer jacket. There's a bank card in the breast pocket in the name of one of the suspects, and a quantity of cash as well. The coat on the floor, we've compared it to the images on the CCTV that we have of the suspects hiding around the back of the beer shop. There's some white tags on the inside of the hood, which we think looks similar to the image on CCTV. There's like a cigarette burn or similar just on the back of the hood, and you can see the white filling through that burn. Yeah, potentially, yeah. Now, looking at the images on CCTV that we've got, there is a similar white mark on the back of this puffer jacket that the lad's wearing. It's a lad with light grey tracksuit bottoms. That little white spot there, I think that corresponds with where it's got a cigarette burn on the back of this jacket. Were these all in that same bag together?
Yeah. The cigarette burn there.
They're clean, aren't they? Yeah, we'll photograph the other side.
More forensic evidence is in the bathroom.
When we've searched the bathroom, there is some blood spattering near to the toilet area here, and on the side of the bath panelling here, there's some blood staining as well. So SOC have been made aware of that. Yeah. We found a yellow towel. You can see there what appears to be blood staining on that, so we'll be seizing that. Also in the bathroom area, we found a balaclava, which potentially might have been used in the offence. And also a Nike jacket that potentially could be linked to the suspects as well. So that'll be getting seized as well.
A crime scene investigator is called to assess the blood.
We can see some contact staining on the radiator and some contact staining on the bottom of the bath panel there. There's also some red staining along the wall here and this part here and at the bottom of the toilet, but it doesn't continue down onto the floor. So I'm just swabbing one bit of apparent blood from each area. That'll be sent off to the labs so that we can potentially identify who that blood has come from. If it came back to the victim that's never been here before, that might then, create a line of questioning for officers.
Back at HMET, the DNA sampling taken from the handlebars of the bicycle left at the crime scene has thrown up a match.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you. Bye-bye. Right, that's Kate Whitehead. So the mini tapes from the bicycle, both right and left, we've got a major contributor from Sahil Ansar. Excellent. So we've got him there, we've got him on that bike. We just need to obviously make sure we've got the actual documents linking that bike to the scene. Brilliant. Excellent, yeah. For interview, she's going to send it through from forensics and we can get that to the interview teams. Good job, thank you.
It's a significant result, but while the custody clock is ticking, the investigation can't afford to slow down.
any of the clothing that these 3 individuals have got on, will any of it match clothing we've seized from you upon your arrest?
No comment.
Or have you disposed of that clothing?
No comment.
Detectives are now beginning to piece together how the suspects got from the waste ground by the canal to the flat where they were arrested in Rastrick.
About 23:27, so that's 17 minutes after the incident of the attack, a silver-type vehicle arrives on Colne Road outside this premises, where 3 people get into that vehicle, which we believe is a taxi. That vehicle goes along Colne Road back towards the main road, and it drives off, so we lose sight of that. About an hour and 15 minutes after the original incident where the male was killed, we've got a male arriving. It's about roughly 10 houses away from where the actual main incident happened.
This is the brothers' home address.
Go into this premises, and what we now know is that the male then comes out and he changes his clothes and is carrying an overnight bag. They get back in that vehicle and they leave that area.
After just 6 days of investigation, all 3 suspects are charged.
CPS have authorised charges of murder and also robbery for all 3 suspects. It's a job well done so far to actually secure charges, to remand the 3 individuals and take them off the streets. The hard work starts now, preparing for court and ensuring that we're trial ready and match fit for when that comes.
One of the most important areas to prepare for court is the forensics. But so far, there are still considerable challenges.
We actually get a knife recovered under a hedge and just behind a wall. Now, initially, we discounted that because it looked an older knife and we couldn't tell how long it had been there. However, when we view the CCTV, it's so close to where we see the suspect run past, and the image does look as if it's been pushed into the mud rather than been there, laying there for quite a while. I've gone back to our area forensic manager, Kate Whitehead, and we've agreed that that needs sending off as well.
So forensically what we've got so far, we've done the umbrella low level is never going to be of any use at all. The gloves low level but suitable for comparison but negative against a man and Sahil, so we will get them checked against Wahab once his DNA goes through, and the bike, the major profile on the handlebars left and right to Sahil.
Fingerprints on gloves?
Yes, the fingerprints on the gloves came back negative, which again, they have been double gloved, would explain. I mean, they said there was a tiny bit of palm, but it wasn't sufficient enough.
With 300 exhibits already secured, the team checks what else might merit forensic testing.
So if we put that down, then Justin, as a make further inquiries for that one.
Are we not doing anything with the body?
Keep it as an exhibit just in case.
A number of items are sent off to be tested for traces of blood and DNA. These include 2 zombie knives and the knife found under the hedge.
Someone's been stabbed, so they potentially think this might be the murder weapon. I'm going to be using a low-power microscope to have a look at every aspect of the knife to see if there's any blood or skin or fatty material on it, potentially get cellular material on the handle to try and link it to a suspect, or potentially blood from the victim to link it to be the murder weapon.
Dozens of items have been seized during the murder investigation of 33-year-old Kaufan Seif.
Retrieve it, and then when we've finished in here, we'll go out and see if we can identify him outside.
These include 2 zombie knives that are believed to belong to the defendants.
So today I'm examining a zombie knife that was found in the suspect's house in the living room. So I'll just be examining it for any touch DNA, blood, skin that potentially from the suspect or victim to link it to the case. It's relatively clean, so there's not much to test. There's still like fibres or potentially like food material on it. I'll be using a HAM solution, which goes a pink colour when it detects blood. So if I find anything, I'll choose a filter paper, takes any potential blood off with that, put my 2 solutions on, and then if it goes pink, it's blood. If it doesn't, then it's something else.
The zombie knife could provide key evidence of the victim's blood.
We always have to look at every different angle, so we always rotate it as much as we can. If any of that indent in the recesses, it could be quite hidden. If it is blood, we'll then sample it and send it off to DNA. We also examine the handle, especially for a knife, a handle, because that's obviously where someone will touch it, so they'll get touch DNA over that. So this knife, I didn't find any blood or skin. I sent off the cutting edge samples to DNA just to make sure if there was anybody that's cut that we'll find it. But for now, I can put this item away and just start the next item.
With no success in the DNA and blood testing, all hopes for the knives rest on the fingerprint lab.
So normally on television series, if a fingerprint's ever shown, it's always a perfect mark. It's obvious whether it's a finger or a piece of palm. And unfortunately, these aren't the sort of marks we get. We tend to get partial marks, which have been left by accident, so that they're only smudges or smears.
Identification expert Stuart Horton is examining the partial print.
I have a suspect for this case, so the first thing I would do is get the fingerprint form for the suspect. Find my orientation, and then try and match the ridge endings and characteristics. And it's just a question of moving them round until you're happy with a certain point, a certain area of the fingerprint. And when you see the flow of the ridges on the fingerprint form match with the flow of the ridges on the photograph, then we can start looking at the finer details. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over to the machine over there, just so I can look at the mark more magnified, and I can mark up the characteristics I believe to be on the photograph that are the same or are consistent with the ones on the fingerprint form. This just gives me a second check. Now we fold the fingerprint form and place it onto the machine. It's just a light box with a light source that comes up from below. This then allows me to shine a light onto the images. I'm marking up the things that I think are consistent between the 2 images. So I can see there's an area where a line ends, count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So those 2 are consistent with each other. I then move to the next one, count down 2 from there. There's another characteristic which matches. When I'm happy I have enough of these points that are consistent, that's when I would say that that was an identification.
Once Stuart's findings are independently verified, the results can be confirmed.
After fully doing my comparison and having it verified by a colleague, I can state that in my expert opinion, that the mark on the knife has been made by the suspect's finger.
The fingerprint on the knife has been expertly identified as Aman Ansar's. The latex gloves recovered from the waste ground have also revealed a hit, this time through DNA.
A large amount of gloves were recovered by the Pulsar team, and therefore we've had to try and narrow down which gloves we then submitted for DNA. And we did that using the CCTV trawl of the area to follow the offender's route. And on the CCTV, it appears as though at this point they discard the gloves that they're wearing. So we've selected those gloves to be submitted for DNA analysis specifically. When the lab have processed those gloves, 1 pair of them has been identified as having a DNA match to Sahil Ansar. So that helps confirm to us that the people that we're tracking on the CCTV from the address of the incident and away from the scene helps corroborate that one of those males is Sahil Ansar.
That's in addition to the DNA found on the handlebars of the bicycle left at the crime scene, which also matches to Sahil Ansar.
So the main evidence in this case hinges around the CCTV and the forensic evidence. They are part and parcel and work hand in glove. The CCTV puts them at the scene, but the actual forensic evidence actually links them categorically that they were there or in that vicinity at that time.
All of the evidence obtained is compiled into a special evidence pack for court. Chris Evans is responsible for producing a 3D model of the victim's injuries.
When the job goes to court, there will be images shown to the jury of the deceased and what's happened to them. When we're looking at the photographs of injuries, if it's, for example, from a cut or a bruise from this point to this point, the relative positions of that injury and other features of the body need to match up. So if someone has a particularly wide mouth, for example, if there's a cut on their cheek, ideally it needs to be the same relative distance from one side of the cut to the mouth, and so we try and make it roughly the same. Showing the actual post-mortem photographs would be quite distressing. So we put together a 3D model of roughly what the victim looked like, trying to make it realistic in terms of their rough shape and size. And then we take the photographs that were taken during the post-mortem, we kind of sample that and add it onto a 3D model of the person. In this case, the deceased has one major injury to his stomach, and then there are other more minor injuries, including some marks to the side of his face and around his side. So the pathologist can go through their report to the jury and everyone at court and use what we've done as a visual guide to help explain their findings.
With the evidence presented to the three defendants, they all admit to being at the address on the night of the murder. But why they were there remains unclear.
The defendants are supposed to provide a defence case statement to us as police officers, and it basically generally outlines their defence at court. In this case, Sahil Ansar puts himself at the address and inside the address from his defence case statement, but I think he claims that it was either self-defence or accidental was the injury that was caused to our deceased, Kalfan Saif. The other two defendants both admit being present outside the address, but deny going in or actually with any intent to commit murder. Our case is that they were all three involved in this as a joint enterprise.
Confident of the key evidence against the three defendants, Senior Investigating Officer Damien Roebuck heads to court for the start of the trial.
All three defendants, so Sahil Ansar, Aman Ansar and Wahab Saif, have all been charged with the murder of Kalfan Saif back in January. They've also all been charged with robbery against Kalfan Saif's surviving wife, Louise. The trial is expected to take between 2 and 3 weeks, where we'll go through the evidence both from a prosecution case and a defence case. From the word go, we were looking for 3 individuals from early CCTV that we recovered. We've done a long, extensive CCTV trawl. We've been working with our partners in the forensic unit and our area forensic manager, and we've currently got what I think is a strong case. I think that initial investigation and that time and effort that was put in over that first 7 days with long extended shifts by the entire investigation team has resulted in all 3 defendants having no choice but to at least put themselves at or outside the scene. coming to the end of the third week of the trial. Yesterday afternoon we received 2 guilty verdicts in relation to murder for Aman Ansar and Sahil Ansar. We've come back this morning and the jury have returned a guilty verdict of manslaughter against Wahab Saif.
Victims often don't get a voice during the trial. At the point of sentencing, the victim personal statement allows them just to explain to the jury, to the suspects themselves and to the judge how this crime has affected them and their immediate family and friends. So this was written by Kalfan's wife. On the 14th of January 2023, my husband Kalfan was murdered in our family home and I was the victim of robbery. My son, then 7, was also witness to the robbery. From this day, my world was turned upside down. Not only did I lose my husband, Kalfan, but I also lost my soulmate, and my 3 children lost their father. We had to immediately leave our family home, and today I'm still currently living in temporary accommodation. I'm trying to raise our 3 children alone. I'm physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. My baby is almost 1. Cries constantly for his father. My son is now 4. He doesn't understand what's happened or why we've had to move. My son, now 8, he has now so much anger in him. He can't talk about what he witnessed or how he feels about losing his father. I fear that my son has now mental health issues due to what has happened. Finally, I've had to attend court and give evidence, and seeing my husband come out into the street where he's dying in front of me. I will never forget the day Kalfan was murdered, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. It's just so tragic, really, and the fact that those 3 children, for them to be in the house and they saw him dying in the street, it just shows how much of an impact it's had on all of them.
This program is rated 14+ and contains scenes of violence and mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
At about 9:35 p.m., we received a radio call. A child was believed to have been abducted. It ended badly.
This person, this phantom, has come and taken a child and done something horrific to them, and we don't know who they are.
You would have some very good leads.
This guy is a good suspect.
He lived in the neighborhood. They knew the family.
We got his DNA. That was submitted to the forensic science people.
They had criminal records of sexual assault and kidnapping.
And the results going to come back, there was no match.
We eliminated at least 50 to 60 people by DNA. It was dead end after dead end after dead end.
They never forgot. That was the thing. They never forgot that little girl.
Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, it was a community known for its unlocked doors and kids playing in the streets until all hours. But the calm of one warm spring evening in 1971 is shattered with the feared abduction of a 6-year-old girl, an unprecedented event that forever changed the city. Here now is a million dead ends.
Windsor, Ontario is at that time, a city of about 200,000 people. It's a border city because it sits right on the Detroit River. It's a working class city. There's automotive industry at the time was very large.
We're the Motor City of Canada. We had the Big Three here for many years. There's a lot of factories that support what the Big Three do. And because of the amount of employment that Big Three were offering, it was a big immigration point in the city. So you get this influx of people from all sorts of different backgrounds working blue-collar jobs, coming to Canada to make a better life for themselves.
It was not unlike a lot of other places in the country, but where we're located made it a dead end in Ontario. So it was a transient type of city. You know, things filtered in, but to filter out, they had to go back the same way. It's not a city that they stopped in on the way somewhere else.
It was a quiet town, you know, very little action going on, you know. I think back then, I think our murder rate was like 1 or 2 a year, if that. Low crime, you know. Very nice, peaceful city.
May the 14th, 1971, we were working the afternoon shift in the Drouillard Road area.
Drouillard Road, it's kind of east central Windsor. It's coming up now, but it was always kind of a rough and tumble neighborhood even back then, known as Ford City.
This area that I worked, it at the time was called Number 8 District. It still looks the same as it ever did. There were a lot of hotels, bars. This used to be on here. The type of calls that we would get down here: bar fights, drinking complaints, assaults, car accidents, just kind of the run-of-the-mill. In May of 1971, my partner and I were working in a patrol car in the Drouillard Road area. It wasn't a really busy evening. At about 9:35 p.m., we received a radio call to attend an address on Drouillard Road where a child was believed to have been abducted. I had only been on the police force for 5 years, so for the number of calls that I had taken, it was an unusual call. We were a little bit away, a few minutes getting down here. 1290 was a little house on the right-hand side down here that is no longer there, but it was just right here at this corner. When we got to the address, we went to the door, and we were met by the mother, who was frantic. Mrs. Topic, her first name was Paula, explained that her daughter, who was 6 years old, and her brother, who was 8, were playing in the backyard when they were approached by a strange man. The stranger offered the little girl $8 if she would walk with him down Drouillard Road a little bit, and he gave her brother a dime, and the little girl left with the man. The brother went right into the house. He went straight into the house and told his mother what had happened.
Paul is there with a friend, and he explains that he sees them walking towards Seminole Road on Drouillard Road. I'm not sure how quickly he went into the house at the time to relay that information, and then that's when Paul and her friend go out looking for Libitsa.
She was described as 6 years of age, approximately 4 feet tall, blonde hair, wearing a pink blouse, and green and yellow slacks. The mother was visibly upset, so we knew that we had to treat this very gently, but we also knew that it was quite serious. We had to get something going. Real quickly, we checked the house, made sure that the little girl wasn't there, hadn't come back. No, she wasn't there. The mother couldn't tell us anything about the person that walked away with the daughter because she didn't see him. So everything that we did get came from the boy. Although because of his age, it was difficult to really get a lot. But the person was described as a male, white, early 20s, tall and slim, wearing dark clothing. When we left the house, I said to my partner, I said, you know, if we don't find this little girl in an hour, we have a big problem. We got a hold of our radio dispatcher and gave a description of the child and the man that was with her. and had more cars sent to the area to start looking for her.
The night she went missing, it was like the largest manhunt in Windsor history. Like hundreds of people, volunteers, police, scoured the streets together, looking in alleys and streets and parks.
Looking back in time, you need some historical context. So in 1971, we still had call boxes in the city of Windsor. So communications to police from dispatch were drastically different. So they get to the Topich residence around 9 o'clock. Sometime prior to that, Michael, Lubitza's older brother, had come in and said that somebody had offered him a dime and promised to pay Lubitza some money to come do a job. There's a separation there. How much of a delay before police response gets into the area, right? And it's no fault of anybody's. It's 1971. Child abduction wasn't a thing. So Paula's first thing that she does with her friend is she takes a walk down to Seminole Street, which is about a half kilometer away, and then comes back and then calls the police.
We attended the residence at 9:35, so the call would have been just a few minutes earlier than that. The little girl was last seen at approximately 9 o'clock. By 9:50, we had a description of both the little girl and the abductor that we put out on the radio.
And then you have the whole dispatch procedure where it's not instantaneous to your computer in your car. It's a more tedious process. And then officers start to get to the area. It floods in fast. A lot of officers do. Even citizens start to come in and help what they called house-to-house checks. We're looking for this girl. We're trying to find her.
We went up and down alleys, streets right in that immediate area looking for this duo. We had lots of eyes on the road. There would have been at least 5 district cars, units from the downtown precinct, and we also had detective cars. There was a lot of people there. At midnight, one of the lieutenants arranged a proper grid search, and my partner and I ended up being sent to the Essex Terminal Railroad, and it was open for people to walk down that way, so it was quite common to see people taking shortcuts going down the tracks. A lot of the people involved were fathers, and there was an urgency for us to try and find her.
Welcome back. On May 14th, 1971, little Lubitza Topich is out playing with her brother and some friends when a stranger lures her away just after 9 p.m. A massive search begins. Hundreds of police and citizens scour the streets. Eventually, they find her 4 hours later. We now return to a million dead ends.
So at 1 o'clock in the morning, Saturday, May 15th, Tom Fortier is looking through the alleys in the 1600 block of Hickory, and he shines his light into the rear yard of 1690. And I remember what he described to me. Tom said he shined the light in and he saw what he thought was a large doll lying on the ground. And unfortunately, that large doll was Lubitza. He was taken aback. You think it's a doll, and then as you get closer, and you realize that no, this is not a doll. This is the 6-year-old girl that we've been looking for, and she's been very badly injured, severely beaten, like a very high level of violence and aggression. It was evident on scene that this was a sexually motivated crime. She was sexually assaulted. Part of her clothes were removed, and ultimately, the cause of death was asphyxiation. The distance that she was from where she was taken was about 1 kilometer, and the time from when it was called into the police to the time that she was located was 4 hours.
At 1:20 a.m. on the 15th, we were picked up at the railroad tracks and taken to a location on Hickory Road, and learned that the little girl had been found deceased in the backyard off of the alley. It was dark. Lighting in the area where she was found wasn't the best. The streets have got lights, but the alleys don't. There were a lot of officers there. A lot of plainclothes detectives were there. And there was a cameraman there. There was an ident unit there.
When looking at the crime scene photographs, a lot of them were blurry. And the old policeman told me that the forensic officer that took the pictures had a huge family. He had 12 kids. And he was so affected by the scene that his hands were shaking. So you can imagine what the scene looked like.
We drove back to the precinct. It was pretty quiet. Being a young father at that time myself, it kind of struck home. We felt that we had done everything we could. We had got our own officers out as quick as we could, but unfortunately, it ended badly.
Right now we're standing at the corner of Drouillard Road in Franklin. Drouillard runs this way, and Franklin, if you look down that way, you can see what's left of the old Ford foundry, which was one of the biggest employers in the area in the 1970s. The Topich family's house was basically right in this area here. I believe it was the second one in. The scrapyard was around in the 70s. It was Paisner Scrapyard, but it's expanded now, and their house was torn down some time ago. There was an employee that worked at the gate at the Ford foundry, and he remembers looking through the window of his office and seeing somebody, a male, dressed in black, crouched down across the street outside the cafe. And he was looking towards where the kids were playing. He was described around 20 or early 20s or so.
The next 2, 3, 4 days a week, we were all looking for a tall, slim guy that wore dark clothing. It seemed like everybody was tall, dark, white male and wearing dark clothing. The description was not odd, put it that way. It was very close to a lot of people. And so we were jumping on anything we could because we wanted to get this taken care of and solved.
We have had many calls come in this weekend, and as a matter of fact, we have interviewed as many as 38 people as of yesterday.
Anytime that we came across anyone like that even kind of remotely looked like it might be, we would talk to them, get their information, and submit it to the investigating detectives. That happened quite a bit over the next days and weeks. But it seemed like it came to a dead end.
We'd written stories over time, just updates, police still looking for the killer, we want tips, there's the rewards. I think very quickly in like 1971 there was like an $11,000 reward, which it's huge at the time, right?
Our best witness is Michael. The information that he provided is the information that seemed to be the genesis of a suspect or person of interest profile. A very early composite. It was done by a person I don't think had any forensic training when it comes to creating composites. But he sat down with Michael and they drew up a simple sketch. It didn't have a ton of detail to it. A white male with a thin face. There's suggestions of potentially light brown to straw blonde hair. But steps taken in the 1970s out of desperation, like we need to find this person. Like they recognized the need to find this person. You're trying to get a description out of an 8-year-old boy who's your best witness, presenting them lineups of people who looks like the person. And I feel bad for Michael because of how much he was put through with this, paraded through so many lineups. Just please show us somebody who looked like the person who took your sister. I can't imagine the amount of trauma that poor boy went through trying to identify the person responsible. I can't imagine. There was very limited other information. We uncovered a report where there was a neighbor said she observed Lubitsa walking with an individual a few blocks away, like in between where she was abducted and where she was found. Not a whole lot of information was gleaned from that. There were kids that were playing in the area, but they never saw anybody actually walk off with her.
I think everybody figured that it was a stranger to town. It was very unusual, and it was shocking at the time. It is something that not normally happens here.
When this happened in 1971, it was a level of fear in this city that people who grew up at that time still remember it. Like, it was completely different. Their lives changed. Everybody was on high alert, where this person, this phantom, has come and taken a child and done something horrific to them. And we don't know who they are.
back to Crime Beat. The murder of 6-year-old Ljubica Topic devastated her family and left Windsor residents shocked, enraged, and fearful. Now, everyone wanted the culprit found, of course, but 20 years later, police were still searching for her killer. We now return to 1 million dead ends.
You can see, based on the amount of reports that are coming in from 1971 to about 1973, they put a lot of work into this case. Forensics in the 70s was limited to hair fiber analysis, to footprints, to fingerprints.
Really, the only tests available at that time were for blood identification, semen identification, and potential hair identification.
Obviously, we have her clothing, and there were things like sticks and bushes that were actually seized from the area. She had a tooth broken out, and there was a thread with blood on it.
Intimate items that came from the victim herself that were collected at autopsy. They were examined for the presence of semen. And there were various hairs that were looked at to determine what type of hair they were, but not necessarily being able to source them. You could identify that there may have been blood present, but not who it might have come from. There was a pubic hair present on some of the items collected from the victim. And that's what was used going forward to be able to forensically assist the investigation. This particular case underwent some of the early DNA testing that took place in the mid to late 90s. We were able to develop a DNA profile from that pubic hair, and that's what was used going forward to be able to compare individuals and eliminate them as the source of that.
So we develop a profile in the 1990s of who we think is responsible for this crime. And that's when Ken Luxford and Glenn Hardstone dig back into this case.
When we went to visit Ljubica's mother, she had a shrine on her mantle in her apartment with her picture of her daughter and candles and the cross. And that's 20 years after the fact. Just seeing the shrine and talking to her, you could feel that she was hurting, very hurting. She was concerned that we'd given up, and I reassured her that we never give up. We looked at all the evidence that we had, and in the file there was already a suspect that was being developed. He looked like the composer. We spoke to his common-law wife at the time. The family had thought he'd done it. She had a grandmother that lived in the area of the alley where the body was found. So there was a connection with him being there. Looking at his criminal records past, we noticed that he was always involved with younger girls, sexual assaults, and the trail had gone from Windsor to Toronto to Winnipeg. In Winnipeg, apparently there was a sexual assault, and he did time there, and then after that he went to Vancouver, where he eventually stabbed the girl that he was living with, and he was doing time in prison. This guy is a good suspect, and we just needed the DNA to match to prove it. I went to Abbotsford, BC, with a forensic officer, and we got his DNA. That was submitted to the forensic science people. Then it come back, there was no match.
It's one of these many times in this case where you're like, we finally got this, right? Especially once DNA comes around, where you have all these people, but now you know you got that smoking gun. If we get the DNA, we're gonna get him. So that's probably the first time where it's like, this is we're gonna get him, and it's not him. So the case kind of goes back on the shelf at that point. The lead is closed, and it sits for a few years until 2004, when Kent McMillan picks it back up.
It was hard to sift through police reports that were 40 years old, and the evidence, and tracking down people, finding persons of interest that really fit the bill. There was just so many tips. Some retired detectives would call with one. They would talk to a neighbor or a friend or an acquaintance, and somebody would mention something during the course of conversation. At odd times, the media would put out a story on Ljubica, and then the phones would start ringing. You go back into the old files and try to match them up. In the statements that we reviewed, the brother was told to play for a while the abductor took Ljubica away. But he immediately went into the house, informed his mother and aunt, who immediately came out of the house, headed southbound on Drouillard to Seminole Street, which is the first main crossing there. By that time, Lubitsa was not in sight, so we figured it made sense that he cut west, either through a house or on Metcalf Street to the first alley, stayed in the alley, then cut over to Hickory when he thought it was safe. We're currently in the 1600 block of Hickory Road, and behind me approximately, we had a witness sitting on his front porch, witnessed the suspect dragging a young girl who was crying southbound on the sidewalk. He went in to grab a cold drink. When he came out, he looked for them. He looked north and south, and when he looked south, they were already gone. So we figured that the suspect took her into the rear of the house where she was found. The fact that the mother and the aunt had walked all that way and had not seen Lubitsa, and surmising the whole time that the abductor and Lubitsa were paralleling them southbound at the same time is the tragedy of the whole thing. This was always a DNA case. That's all we had as evidence. In 2004, we resubmitted all the clothing from the victim up to the Center of Forensic Sciences.
You'll recall that we did have a DNA profile from the pubic hair, late 90s, but it was one item. By the time the mid-2000s came, we had that same DNA profile in many locations on the victim's clothing where there was blood present. It gives you that confidence that you're dealing with the target profile, that this might be the DNA profile from the individual who might be responsible for this particular event.
We had quite a few leads that we had to work on. One of the most suspicious but promising was from a lady who lived in Northern Ontario. She had been sexually molested by her brother, who now resided in Toronto. He had a record for sexual assault, kidnapping. I received another phone call that stated he was a resident on an address in Assumption Street in Windsor, maybe a 25-minute walk from Drouillard Road where Lubitsa was living. Eventually he was excluded. There was a family in town here who, the whole family of career criminals, involved in drugs, theft. We received a tip that the father of this clan had molested this person when they were young, but he had since passed away. So we had to get familial DNA. He was excluded. Some people we just approached and told them what we were investigating, and they agreed to give us a blood sample. Other times I would have to use search warrants to get the blood samples from hospitals, clinics, dentist offices. You would have some very good leads. They lived in the neighborhood, they knew the family, they had criminal records of sexual assault and kidnapping, they had, violent streaks. But in the end, they were all excluded. We excluded close to 30 people. During the time of submitting blood samples, I was advised by the center that they were running out of comparative samples. I arranged for a meeting up at the center, and I begged that they go over it one more time. And thank God they found more samples of semen on the clothing and that they were suitable for comparison. So it gave us more hope that we're going to be able to solve this.
I moved here as a reporter in 2006, and almost immediately, especially because I was doing the crime beat a lot, people would, ask me like, "Oh, so you know about Lubitsa?" Or "What do you know about Lubitsa?" Right? It was always this thing that was in the ether of the city. It really bled into the fabric. People still talk about it. People who were kids remember, and not really understanding why, but all of a sudden they couldn't go out to play, or their parents were locking the doors at night. They remember that very distinctly. As I was writing it over the years, I would get phone calls or emails or letters about people like, "Oh, I remember that, and I still think about it." And they didn't even know her, but it was this horrific case that just stuck in the collective consciousness of the city. I landed an interview with Paula Tobich, Lubitsa's mother, and it was the first time ever in 40 years that she'd talked publicly about it. That interview was heartbreaking. It was clear that this incident had just punched a hole in that family. It cratered that family. And she lived with it every day of her life. She talked about still dreaming about her. She had a photo. She would walk by and still speak to her to her little girl that had died 44 years ago. And it was like, for her, it had happened yesterday. She not only thought about her daughter, but she thought about the killer. Obviously, she wondered who this person was, but she talked about just being sad all the time, and she hoped that maybe the killer was living with that as well. You know, she said, like, how could somebody do that and it not weigh on them somehow? And at the same time, the police, for the first time ever, announced that they had found this man's tooth at the scene of the crime. First time in 44 years, they had made this announcement, hoping to, like, breathe life back into this case.
There were teeth found at the scene that would match a male suspect between the ages of 16 and 20. It's my opinion that at the scene, when she was taken to the rear of 1690 Hickory, that she fought. She fought quite violently, and I know she had a pair of hard-soled shoes, penny loafers on, probably kicked him in the mouth, which would result in losing the tooth, and then he reciprocated with some very violent actions towards her. And just thinking of her, those last moments fighting for her life, pretty bad.
When I picked up the case in 2014, there was a rush to get this case done, given the age. Because the age of the case, the person that we think is responsible was around 20. Well, they're getting up there now too, and there's an increased chance that this person is also now deceased. We actually have over 700 persons of interest for a variety of different reasons. If you have 700 persons of interest, how many do you really have? You don't have any, like you don't have any focus, because there's so many different things that you have to go through to eliminate. When we tested the vaginal swab in 2015, we located an evidence. It had never been tested. The seal was still intact from 1971. It comes back to the exact same profile. We put it onto databases. I sent it to the United States and had it compared to American databases. I sent it to Europe to have it compared there, and hoping for a hit, and it never registered a hit anywhere. So now we keep going for persons of interest. You come across these people that look like very interesting suspects, but they've been deceased. It was dead end after dead end after dead end, and some of them were so exciting, like this has to be the right person. I can tell you that we eliminated at least 50 to 60 people by DNA. So around 2016, we ended up sending some of our raw DNA down to a lab in the States to have it processed to get some phenotyping. So it gives you probability predictors for things like hair color, eye color, freckling. You can potentially infer like where their ancestral heritage might have come from in the world, things like that. When we get the phenotyping back, we learned that this person was very highly likely to have just had like brown hair, was likely to have little to no freckling, and I think the heritage indicated more towards like Scotland and Northern Europe. So what we did is we had a composite done up from what the person may have looked like in 1971, and another one what they could look like now. We actually released those to the public. Is this triggering anybody? No leads were ever developed, and it just seems to be another dead end.
The Golden State Killer case went unsolved for 43 years.
So in 2018, Golden State Killer has just broken, and they've used investigative genetic genealogy. And there are a variety of different ancestry-type databases in the United States where you can upload your DNA, and you discover people who share DNA with you.
The way investigative genetic genealogy works is you take the suspect's DNA and you put it onto a public website, and you get matches back, which means that those people are genetically matched with the suspect. And so if you build those people's family trees, the suspect will be on their family trees. It'll show how many centimorgans the match shares with the suspect's DNA. And the higher the centimorgans, the closer the relationship. And so you can estimate that the person might be a second cousin to third cousin, or fourth cousin to third cousin once removed.
When that kit gets set up, we do come back with 4 people that shared some DNA. There is more to varying degrees, but you can see different levels of shared centimorgans between these individuals and the person who killed Libica. So now we want to find out more about these people and build family trees around their families.
If they're, let's say, a second cousin, you have to build at least 3 generations up and then come down 3 generations. So there's a lot of people to look through. We eventually came down to 2 suspects that lived in Windsor, 2 blocks from the scene, approximately the right age and genetically looked like it would be in the right level on the family tree chart.
One of them comes up on our massive person of interest list from 1971. So immediately the focus becomes, let's get DNA from these guys. And after 2 or 3 months, we were able to obtain a sample from at least the one brother, the one that was, his name was listed in the box. And I thought, we're done. And when we get the CFS report back, he is excluded. It is not him. In June of 2019, I was fortunate to meet Steve Kramer, who was with the FBI at the time, and worked on the Golden State Killer case. He facilitated getting our DNA profile onto Family Tree DNA. We're the first Canadian law enforcement kit that Family Tree DNA accepted. And I remember I was actually out for a jog, and my phone goes. It's the day or two after we've uploaded it, and it's Steve Kramer. He's already looked at our kit. He says, hey, you've got a second cousin.
I'm in heaven. I mean, a second cousin, it's like, this is awesome. And it turns out that his grandmother's brother was married to someone else in the tree. So now we know it's a descendant of this couple.
They had a son and a daughter. The daughter had one son who lived in Windsor at the time, still lives in Windsor, but based on lifestyle, really didn't expect this person to be the person responsible. The son from that intersection had 3 boys. So when you look at it, we have 5 people, including the father of the 3 boys, that could have potentially committed this crime. There are 3 of those individuals that are living. 2 of them are deceased. One of the 3 brothers actually had died in the previous year or so while we were investigating this. So I was fortunate because the focus we have was 2 individuals. One was this deceased brother, and the other was his half-brother. Based on what I was seeing with that half-brother and some of his known police contacts and sort of the similarity of some of the acts that he did compared to what we're seeing in this case, I thought it's going to be this person, right? Our surveillance team working on this person in another jurisdiction was able to get a sample from him, and the comparison comes back, and it's not him. His DNA does not match. He is not the person responsible, so it's just wind out of the sails. I ended up contacting the rest home that the other brother who was in Alberta, and we determined that there was still a medical sample. I wrote a warrant to obtain that sample. It was obtained and brought back here to Windsor from Alberta.
In late 2019, we received a lung tissue sample that was in paraffin-embedded block, which we can sometimes work with and get DNA from, and that's what was submitted to us.
I have a great relationship with the CFS biologist who worked on this case with me. The one thing I know about Melinda is she gets there fairly early. I think she gets there about 6 o'clock in the morning. She leaves early in the afternoon. So if I send her an email late in the afternoon, she's not going to get it, but at 6:01 the next day, I'm going to have a response. After I collect myself after seeing that the one half-brother is not responsible for it, I said I'm going to send her an email and just say, hey, just following up on that other sample, the tissue sample, we haven't heard back yet. And I get a bounce back reply from her email saying she's out of office, will return on Monday.
Welcome back to Crime Beat. After nearly 5 decades, 700 suspects, and countless dead ends, police think they found Lubitsa's killer. But will the DNA results prove them right this time? Here now is the conclusion of a million dead ends.
That particular morning, it was December 9th, it was a Monday, so I came in as I usually do. You grab everything out of your mailbox, and I realized, oh, the results are back from this case. This is great, let's take a look. We've had a number of comparison samples that were submitted to us over the years. This particular one was unique in that it was a biopsy sample. Often we'll typically get reference samples from people who are living, so it may be a blood sample or a buccal sample, but to get a lung tissue sample is not typical. It's a bit unusual, and so it sort of piques your interest. I look at these papers and my breath got taken away. You look at them and you think, oh my God. And because I'm an early bird, there's nobody else around, and I'm the only one that knows. And then I have the email from Scott sitting in my inbox, and I can't tell him
I worked an afternoon shift in major crime that night. I got home. By the time I got up in the morning, it's 11 o'clock. So I checked my email, and I have nothing from her. And that's really unusual because she's really good at getting back to you.
We always have to get everything checked to make sure that it is sound and that I'm releasing reliable results. Being able to finally email him back and say, "Can I call you?" with no answer to his question, just, "Can I call you?" That's when your heart starts racing.
I still remember I'm sitting on my couch, 12:30, phone rings. It's Melinda, and I remember her saying, like, "Are you sitting down?" And she says, "Yeah, this is a match."
All those profiles you've been generating since the mid-90s, and they're the same. This matches.
A wave of emotion hits me. I've been working this for 5 years. Kent McMillan, 8 years. Luxford and Hartstone put a couple years on this. All these guys, dating back to 1971, who have carried this case on. And for the first time in 48 years, you've identified the person, which is what you wanted. But now it's all these extra steps, like, okay, we've got to let the family know. Then you pull up in front of the house, and you know the family's all waiting in there, and like, oh my God. Paula absolutely understood what I was telling her. It's not happiness, because it's still the death of Lubitsa, but the fact that there's finally some resolution, there's a relief in that family that it was not somebody that they knew.
Over the past 48 years, we've continued to search for answers in this case. As of Monday, December 9th, 2019, that search is now over.
It was a very emotional press conference. The detectives that had worked on it, even in the last few years, there was ones there that were right from the beginning. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. You could tell those officers, it meant a lot to them. And several of them said, like, this is the defining moment of my career. We got a lot of letters saying, like, I've always wondered, thank God they finally found out who did this. I'm just glad this person's not still out there. I knew Lubitsa when I was in kindergarten. I visited her grave over the years, and I just always wondered, and I'm just so glad this was finally solved. So at that press conference, the police said they have solved the case. We know exactly who it was. This man moved somewhere out west after the crime, and that's it. It irked me. So they made this big show about, after all this time, finally solving this case. We know who it was, closure for the family, closure for the community, except there wasn't closure because they refused to say who it was. They claimed it was a privacy issue because this man had died, and they wouldn't even tell us when he had died. Their argument was, since he's dead, they cannot officially charge him. And since they can't charge him, they can't release his name because it would violate his right to privacy. Their claim was that a dead person has a right to privacy 30 years after their death. First of all, they had released names of dead suspects in the past, as of many other police forces. So it just didn't hold water for me. So we did several stories. We talked to experts. We wrote columns saying it just doesn't make any sense. It's a general consensus, I think, that you can't libel a dead person. So that was one issue we had. The other one was like, it's only right that after all this time, the community should have closure too. And the third issue we had was, like, what other crimes out there that could this help with? Like, there might be a cold case out west where he moved. There might have been some in Windsor. We don't know. There's no way to know unless you put it out there. So we didn't let it go. The next step was a Freedom of Information request. We asked for the identity of the killer, his age at the time, did he know the family, where he lived in proximity to the family, and where did he go out west when he moved? And are you aware of any other crimes that he might have done? Denied. Police wouldn't give it to us. We appealed, denied again. So we appealed it to the Privacy Commission. And that began more than a 3-year process of us fighting with them to get it. And then late one night, I was sitting at home, and I got an email from the Windsor Police privacy people saying, after correspondence from the Privacy Commission and after a new look at this from new police management, here it is. So I found out that the killer's name was Frank Arthur Hall. He was 22, an unemployed laborer at the time, I believe. And he lived just down the street from this family. I think they lived in the 1200 block of Drouillard Road, and he was in the 1800 block.
He was from Windsor. He had some minor criminal contacts with Windsor Police Service before, and some afterwards. Nothing of significant eye-catching nature that you would look at this person and say, oh wow, look at that. I found his contact card, and I could see that in May of 1971, his address changed to 1817 Drouillard Road, which is 6 blocks from the abduction point and about 2 blocks from where she was murdered. He did end up migrating out west, and he lived in Edmonton for the remainder of his days. He raised children after that, and actually that was the next chapter in this case, because a few years later we decided we were going to release the name. We had to let his daughters know. Now I've got to go out and tell them, like, some pretty horrific news about their father. And I've never seen two people absorb that type of news as well as these two did. Yeah, very impressed with them.
The Windsor Police did say that it was 2 parts, new management having another look at it, and the Windsor Star fighting for it for so long that they finally decided to release it. It was nice to at least acknowledge that it was related somehow to this battle we went through.
When you finally hear that the case has been solved and you hear the name, what did you think?
I never heard the name before. That name was not in the box.
When I received the word that they had found him, it was a real satisfying day.
Probably the crowning moment of my career to actually get to that point. And I think it's a crowning moment for this police service to be able to preserve that evidence and just pursue this until it was finally finished after almost 50 years.
Like from day one, with the officers on the scene, with the forensic officers, and all the officers all along. It's like, this is the culmination of everybody's hard work. And why did we do this? For the family. Worth every second I put in.
You know, you have this picture of this young girl walking away, holding hands with this monster who's about to take her life, and her brother kind of watching, not really understanding what was happening. I think that was one of the things that really struck a chord with people, was that, like, that kind of thing never happened in Windsor before, but now it happened, and like, it could happen to anybody. That could happen to my kid, or that could happen to your kid. And so that was a scary thought for a lot of people. It made them more concerned about their neighbor. Like, you know, we look out for our neighbor a little more, maybe.
They never forgot. That was the thing. They never forgot that little girl. And that made me feel good, because she shouldn't have been forgotten.
Though Lubitsa's family declined to speak with us on camera for this episode, they did tell us about the shadow they lived under following her death. With Frank Hall dead, they will never know why. But they are immensely grateful to the Windsor Police Service for never giving up. In solving Lubitsa's murder, they received the Linda Shaw Memorial Award for Cold Cases. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.
This program is rated 14+ and contains scenes of violence and mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
There were obvious traumatic injuries to the victim.
I'd never seen a beating that bad.
That level of hatred was next level. I've never seen anything like that before or since.
All through this ordeal, I've lost many nights of sleep thinking about it.
I think the randomness really struck everyone involved, but here we didn't have any motive.
Watch out, now is the time, watch out for Mr. Big.
All your friends that you met, they're not your friends, they're my friends. They're all police officers.
This is evil, hatred, and pure violence at its most disgusting. It is terrible.
It completely changed the way that I see the world.
Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, when a kind-hearted, loving family man is found viciously beaten to death, the case becomes a true murder mystery. Investigators used every strategy they had to identify who was responsible for the senseless attack. Here now is Nancy Hicks with Face to Face with Evil.
In the fall of 2010, a woman walking to work in an older residential neighborhood in northwest Calgary cut through the parking lot of a small strip mall. It was still dark outside when she came across a disturbing scene. She called 911 and described what she saw. A man lying in a pool of blood, his body battered and beaten beyond recognition. Constable Greg Alsop was one of the first officers on scene.
It was just before 9 a.m. We got a call. Dispatch came over the radio saying that there's a 1043, which is a check on welfare. There's a male in the parking lot here, covered in blood and laying on the ground unresponsive. The victim's vehicle was parked in the parking lot, nosed into a stall, and when you come around to the passenger side of the vehicle, the victim's body was laying on the ground. The passenger side of the vehicle was completely covered in blood, as if he was trying to get into the vehicle, but obviously couldn't make it and ended up deceased on the ground. We followed the blood trail, which came through the parking lot, up these stairs, and into the back alley here. And then there was a large pool of blood and the victim's belongings, wallet and car keys and stuff were all laying here on the ground. Definitely didn't seem like a robbery. Nothing was taken. I mean, easily could have taken the vehicle, taken the wallet, anything, but everything was just left. It just seemed very random.
Above the blood-soaked pavement, officers noticed fresh paint on the side of the building.
There's fresh graffiti on the wall, and there was a Nazi swastika freshly painted sometime that evening, I guess. But it was the freshest out of all the graffiti on the wall.
Officers radioed back to their sergeant.
Obviously, it was suspicious, just given the level of violence that happened to that man. So at that point, then it's now securing the scene. Once everything was secure here, we started going door to door in the neighborhood, knocking on doors, and just talking to homeowners and residents just to see if they'd heard anything. People were starting to give us tips of, well, there's this house over here, has some undesirable people living in it.
All possible leads were passed along to the homicide unit, including Detective Dave Sweet, the primary investigator assigned to the case.
I do remember attending the scene that day, later that morning, to have a look around. There was a wallet with identification in it in the alley near to where the body had been found, along with some car keys. And the assumption is that the wallet belonged to the victim that was found a short distance away. And in that wallet there was identification in the name of Mark Mariani, who was a male that was about 47 years of age at the time.
At that same time, across town, Mark Mariani's family was searching for him. He'd gone out with friends the night before and never came home.
My brothers went out to go look for him because my grandma had called and said he didn't come home the night before, which was very unusual for him.
My mom asked us to go take a look, so me and my brother hopped on our motorcycles and kind of went to around where he was living and where he kind of frequented.
It was when we were riding around a neighborhood in the Northeast when my dad called me, and we were trying to search for him, and I have a Bluetooth headset in my helmet, and I answered it, and all I heard was screaming. It sounded like a war zone was going on in the background. There was screaming, crying, and I could tell my dad was fighting back tears, and he told me that they had found him murdered and that we needed to come home right away. And just hearing my mom screaming and After my dad said he was murdered, I almost crashed my motorcycle because I just went black. And I don't even remember getting home.
Nothing could have prepared Mark Mariani's family to learn of the horrific fate he suffered.
And it hit us, I don't even know how you can describe it, kind of being in a black tunnel.
Welcome back to Crime Beat. The brutal beating and stomping of Mark Mariani was one of the most horrific assaults that seasoned investigators had ever seen. And with no obvious suspects, police had their work cut out for them. Here again is Nancy Hicks with Face to Face with Evil.
On October 3rd, 2010, at 2:26 a.m., Mark Mariani was captured on CCTV pulling into a Northwest Calgary strip mall. He got out of his SUV and entered a business. About 20 minutes later, he left the store, got into his vehicle to leave, then for some reason changed his mind. He got out and walked a few steps into an alley behind the strip mall.
The alley was very dark at that time. The cameras didn't capture sort of the mouth of the alley or the steps up into the alley. So once he moved away from that camera, we didn't see him again, and we never did truthfully ever see him return.
About 6 hours later, Mark Mariani was found beaten to death.
Mark's injuries were indicative of a very violent attack, a very violent beating that made him nearly unrecognizable to the picture that we had of him from his driver's license. You couldn't put the photo to Mark and say that they were one and the same person.
The medical investigator attended the scene with us and determined that it was indeed a suspicious death. I videotaped the scene prior to it being photographed.
Police examined multiple scenes. The first was where Mark Mariani was found outside of his SUV.
On the vehicle and the ground, there was just a lot of blood down the side of the vehicle, and it appeared that he was trying to get into his vehicle.
They followed a trail of blood through the parking lot, up a few stairs, and around the corner to the side of the strip mall.
In the alley on the north side of the strip mall, there was a lot more blood where the assault had taken place. There was blood projected onto the wall of the strip mall, and there was also, it appeared to be like a boot mark that was left on the wall.
And it certainly appeared to us were consistent with a stomping type action where the toe of the boot or the footwear was running and rubbing up against the wall as the boot was coming down. And it left behind basically particles of rubber.
One of my investigators took a regular swab and swabbed it vigorously to get enough material onto it.
Police also noted and photographed the wall where the beating happened.
It seemed to be swastikas and similar type images.
Forensic investigators were meticulous in gathering evidence.
Across the alley, there was a newly constructed house that wasn't occupied, and on the back step and patio, there was some cigarette butts and some beer bottles, and that was within direct sight of that wall. I directed my guys to seize them and examine them. You never know what's going to be involved or what's going to be relevant, so you collect everything and then send away the irrelevant items.
The last spot they searched was the roof of the strip mall.
You know, it's funny, almost every single scene that we do, if there's a roof, we search it. That is the only scene I can remember ever finding evidence at. So you do it because there might be evidence there, and in this case there happened to be something there.
So we have a witness saying, hey, I heard people in the alley that night. This is kind of the approximate area where they were. We had another witness say, I heard strange noises from the roof that night. And up on the strip mall roof, what we found was a can of red spray paint.
As homicide detectives worked through the early stages of the investigation, officers met with Mark Mariani's family.
People don't understand what it's like to go through a murder in the family, and everything feels foreign and everything feels wrong and upside down, and things happen so quickly that you don't have a chance to really catch your breath, and your brain can't process exactly what's happening to you.
We were ushered into vehicles and straight up to police headquarters. But we didn't know any information as to what had happened.
We learned through family that Mark, as a profession, had started to try and help people with some of their legal matters.
So Mark was a real champion for rights, people's rights, and the letter of law. He found a way to help people, and not for money, not for profit, but because that was the right thing.
He was helping me actually get out of a motorcycle ticket. Funny enough, that was the first ticket I had ever gotten, so he was just explaining how we could go to court and plead it down. He was trying to help other people out with tickets as well, so.
We also knew that through that work, Mark had had interactions with others that were doing the same thing, that the family, in a couple of instances, were a little suspicious of. And so the names of those individuals were provided to us, and they became people that would need to be spoken to, and we'll call them people of interest.
At 47, Mark Mariani lived with his parents. His health had deteriorated after suffering from Crohn's disease for more than half of his life.
Growing up, he was, the big, tall, barrel-chested, chubby kid, 240 pounds, 6'2", to the point where when it was ravaging him and it was hurting him, he was down to 140 to 160 pounds. Frail, 95% of the time. It was always in pain, to the point where, he couldn't stand straight, couldn't walk properly, couldn't function. Eating was a chore. Going to the washroom was a panic all the time.
On October 1st, 2010, doctors gave Mark new hope that he wouldn't need his colostomy bag anymore. 2 days later, he was found murdered.
Something we speculated was maybe potentially one of the reasons Mark had gone into the alley that night was to relieve himself, essentially, because it was very uncomfortable for him because of the Crohn's disease.
Police quickly ruled out robbery,
because of the fact that the contents of his pockets seemed to have been spilled out into the alleyway. Nothing appeared to have been taken from the wallet. The wallet looked like it had just been discarded. Credit cards were still there, bank card was still there. There was no indication at all that anything had been taken from the wallet.
But investigators struggled to come up with a motive.
I had a victim that had been randomly attacked, had been stomped and kicked to death. I'd never seen a beating that bad at that time in my career. And I would be hard pressed to say since that point in time either.
On Monday, October 4th, 2010, an autopsy was completed at the Chief Medical Examiner's office in Calgary.
I attended the autopsy with my investigators, and during that we take photographs at the direction of the medical examiner, and there were obvious traumatic injuries to the victim, to his head and to his arms and upper body.
Mark had suffered a variety of injuries that were consistent with being beaten to death. A number of those injuries also were consistent with being caused by either the heel of a boot or the toe of a boot. Mark had significant fractures in his skull and a number of broken bones.
The official cause of death was blunt force trauma.
The victim's clothes were so blood-soaked. So once we took the clothing back to the forensic building, dried it, and then were photographing it more carefully, one of the investigators noticed that one of the stains appeared to be paint instead of blood.
Flecks or spatters that we could see that had been sort of transferred onto Mark's jacket. It suggested that when Mark's attack had occurred, that Mark had come in contact with wet paint, wet red paint, in fact.
Again, investigators went back over tips gathered by the first responding officers who had gone door to door.
This officer, a very diligent officer, he knocked on the tenant that lived above, who advised the officer that there was a group of skinheads that was living in the basement of that home, and that individual believed that they must know something about what had happened.
The house in question was just a few doors down from where Mark Mariani was beaten and killed.
The name Robert Reitmeyer to me didn't mean anything, but this officer, because of previous dealings with Rob, he was aware that he was somebody that was purported to be part of a hate group known as the Western European Brotherhood. Somebody that was known to walk around with big heavy boots.
Officers reviewed CCTV surveillance video from businesses in the strip mall. Robert Reitmeyer was captured on video with 2 other people in a nearby liquor store at 1:12 a.m., about an hour and 15 minutes before Mark Mariani arrived at the strip mall. They made a purchase and left a couple of minutes later. The rental car business captured them next as they headed northbound towards the alley.
And he's wearing those big boots. And he's with a friend who we later go on to identify as Tyler Stirrup. Rob Reitmeyer and Tyler Stirrup are associates to one another. They purport to be part of the same hate group. Both Rob Reitmeyer and Tyler Stirrup both did have criminal records, and both were known to the police.
In 2006, Robert Reitmeyer was charged with attempted murder. That charge against Reitmeyer was stayed in 2007, which essentially ended the prosecution.
I also know that Reitmeyer had been targeted in a shooting at one time in downtown Calgary, and the bullet missed him and struck a poor gentleman walking down the road, making him blind. One thing that didn't make any sense at all is when we looked at Mark Mariani, and if you're going to contemplate that a white supremacist group is going to be a part of this murder, Mark clearly appears to be a Caucasian male. It sort of flies in the face, I guess, of what we would typically associate if white supremacist groups going to be violent. You know, our assumption usually is that they're going to be violent against non-white people. So it was one thing that made us, question what would their actual motivation be for even carrying out this attack.
Police worked to eliminate other persons of interest and pored over Mark Mariani's banking records and final footprints of life.
He had been at a country bar. Then we knew that he had gone into the store because we had video of him inside the store, and we knew that he had left the store. And that's where his timeline ends. There was several early investigative theories that I was working on. Over the course of the first week, I think we identified potentially 18 people of interest. But what was amazing about this is as we went through this list of people, and each person was cleared or alibied and cleared through an investigative process, the case against Rob Reitmeyer became infinitely stronger, because ones that you can't clear and you can't alibi, the case against them just by virtue becomes stronger.
But if Reitmeyer and Stirrup were involved, police would need further evidence.
We go and we start to try and collect information that will either prove or disprove the possibility that he is involved. And that includes things like utilizing surveillance resources, collecting garbage. In Reitmeyer's garbage, we did not find bloody weapon or clothing, but what we did find were these graffiti doodles. Basically scraps of paper that people had just been doodling on. So now we knew with some level of certainty that at least some of those tags that we had seen on the wall at the crime scene had been made by people that lived in the residence that Reitmeyer lived in. We knew that we had them on video. We searched social media accounts, and we read their comments and some of their posts. We saw that they had an interest in graffiti. There was some vile talk about, particularly on Reitmeyer's account, about curb stomping people when they talk to you. These were things that we saw on the social media. Everything was hedging that they were our suspects. And so I actually made a presentation towards the tail end of 2010 to the Crown Prosecutor's Office.
Detectives were told they needed more evidence.
So we begin an investigation in the shadows.
Months went by and there were no arrests in the murder of Mark Mariani. The homicide unit had Crime Stoppers film a reenactment in hopes of generating further tips in the case. Mark's 3 siblings went to the alley where he was killed. They watched as actors played out the violent attack.
He died for what? It's senseless that, he would have given the shirt off his back to those people. So please do the right thing and come forward to the police with the information that you have so that my family, our mom and dad, and my kids, we can all, understand, and put an answer to why Mark died.
As the investigation continued, police began receiving results of forensic testing on several exhibits seized from the murder scene.
We knew that when Mark's jacket came in contact with red paint, and because we knew that red paint came from that spray paint can, we were able to do testing through the manufacturer on dry times of that paint, and we knew that paint dried within 7 to 9 minutes of it being applied to that wall, which meant that whoever applied that red paint to the wall had done so within 7 to 9 minutes of Mark entering into the alley that night. The red paint found on the wall matched to the red paint found on the jacket, which matched to the red paint found in the spray paint can recovered from the roof.
It was actually kind of frustrating because there was a very poor quality fingerprint that was found on the spray paint can, and it wasn't high enough quality to ever be identified. There was also DNA that was recovered on the spray paint can, and that wasn't sufficient for analysis. The cigarette butts and swabs from the beer bottles that were across the alley were sent away for analysis, and there was DNA on there that linked to the suspects.
At one point, Robert Reitmeyer was questioned by police for possible involvement in property offenses involving graffiti. A warrant was executed at his mother's home where he lived. At that same time, both Reitmeyer and Tyler Stirrup were targets of covert police strategies, including wiretaps.
They've got sweet. What worries me is the fact that when the cops just raided my house for graffiti, you know what I mean? Yeah, so what? So they can't even connect that though. How can they actually factually forensically connect that? They can't. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Other than that, they got nothing. It's just the anxiety I got about it. Oh, obviously. Well, dude, when I first opened the paper and the head the title "Lead in Random Killing," I was like, holy. I was like, no way. My stomach kind of dropped a little bit there for a second. Yeah, then I read the article. I was like, joke, clown school. You know what they're doing? They're just trying to make it to the family Because I bet you the family's harassing the cops while you guys just trying to make it to the family so it looks like they're doing something, right? They're not doing shit. They got nothing.
Police obtained warrants to surreptitiously seize Reitmeyer and Stirrup's boots for testing, which were then returned. Then, in early 2011, Stirrup met some new friends that were a part of a criminal organization involved in street violence. What he didn't realize was that it was a fictitious organization, and his new friends were actually undercover police officers.
Tyler Stirrup and the undercover police officer developed a trust and a bond. And he decided that on one given day, he was going to tell the undercover police officer what he had done.
You knew this guy or no?
Just total range.
Did he?
Went too far. Little accident.
Oh.
Little too good at what we do sometimes, I guess.
So you piss on your guys' work and...
Yeah, he got done in for it. Bro punched him once in the jaw and he hit the floor and it was all booze from there. Just booze. Girls getting at shoot party. Well, when we left, he was like, barely, like, he stopped breathing.
Yeah. Heavy.
Started kicking him again, and he started breathing. And we just kept jumping on his head. My bro kept putting his hands on my shoulders and jumping up, both feet. I don't know, we went for a good 5 minutes of straight boots to the head, body, everything stomped. Two of us, both feet in there, like a bit of bull on a steak.
The undercover operation ultimately, I think, led to the justification for why this occurred to be simply because they could. A disgusting reason. But it truly was as a result of Mark Mariani entering into the alley that night. 2 men, hateful and full of rage, who had been drinking, fueled an attack against Mark that ultimately took his life for no good reason other than they could. And that's probably the most chilling reason and explanation for what could have occurred. Tyler Stirrup likened it to 2 pit bulls on a stake. And that, I think, sort of speaks to what the motive was. And the motive was, there was no motive. It was just to be able to do it. I think shits and giggles was something else that was used at one time.
You think there's any rats? Stuff like that?
Only me and my bro and you two know about it.
Okay.
My brother's my brother, man.
Well, don't worry, this ain't leaving this room.
2 days later, police monitored a call where Stirrup warned Reitmeyer not to fall victim to an undercover police operation.
Also, another thing, Mr. Big, you got to start being real careful about you.
I know. Yeah.
Watch out. Now is the time. Watch out for Mr. Big.
Yeah, agreed. 100%.
They got absolutely nothing but Mr. Big.
Especially with all these
that's the only option they could ever pin us with.
Especially with all these new guys floating around us now.
On May 31st, 2011, nearly 8 months after Mark Mariani was killed, both Reitmeyer and Stirrup were taken into custody.
They're arrested, they're provided their conversation to a lawyer, and then prior to being formally charged, which they got to go through our arrest processing unit, have a bail hearing to be formally charged, but in between that time, we conduct interviews. The police have an opportunity to conduct an interview.
Reitmeyer refused to speak. Tyler Stirrup was interviewed by Calgary Police Detective Mike Shute.
For Tyler, like I remember, put my hand out, shake his hand, and he had his arms folded. I mean, he couldn't be more tight than what he was at that moment. But I didn't take my hand away. I'm like, you're shaking my hand. And, I waited, not long, but it was a socially awkward, long pause. But he reached out and he shook my hand. And that's the part where, as an interviewer, we're going to help control that environment a little bit.
The interview went on for hours, and slowly, the detective began presenting their evidence against him.
The investigative side, who we spoke to, the witnesses, we had some CCTV, but it wasn't fantastic CCTV. Some of the key evidence that we had was regarding the spray paint can, the spray paint graffiti, and a transfer of that spray paint over onto Mr. Mariani's clothing. So, you know, those were pieces that I was able to present to him to see if he was going to provide any information, but Tyler didn't provide any information. He, you know, stuck to, I'm not going to talk about this, I'll wait for my lawyer.
The officer played some of the conversations that had been recorded between Stirrup and Reitmeyer.
Yeah, I just had the Calgary Global News on.
And then Detective Shute told Stirrup he was the subject of a Mr. Big sting operation.
I think for him it was a bit of a shock, and he's trying to replay really fast his last couple of months of his life and everything that he did and he said and where he went. And I just said to him, I said, Tyler, like, all your friends that you met, they're not your friends, they're my friends. They're all police officers. So it was a hard shock to him that he had become subject to an elaborate undercover operation and provided that information to us. I think he knew it was a heinous crime, and morally he knew that that was wrong. Did he have remorse? I don't believe that for a second.
After the interview, both Stirrup and Reitmeyer were taken to arrest processing, where they would be formally charged. Their conversations en route were recorded.
Fingerprint. Mr. Big.
Should have known better to trust anybody. Here I am telling you to be careful, Mr. Big. You think it's Mr. Big? Yeah.
Both Tyler Stirrup and Robert Reitmeyer were accused of the second-degree murder of Mark Mariani.
Nancy, what are you learning about their history?
Robert Reitmeyer and Tyler Stirrup are best known for their affiliation with white power groups in Calgary. The two are believed to be leaders of the Webb, or Western European bloodline. Reitmeyer was charged with attempted murder in 2006 after a man's skull was cracked open. Those charges have since been stayed.
Nancy, what are police saying about the motive in this case?
Police say they believe this was a completely random attack. They say Mariani was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it could have been anyone. It just happened to be that Mariani was the victim.
Welcome back to Crime Beat. An undercover police operation revealed a senseless motive for the violent murder of Mark Mariani. But would the evidence be enough to convict the pair of self-proclaimed neo-Nazis? Here now is Nancy Hixt with a conclusion of Face to Face with Evil.
Days after Robert Reitmeyer and Tyler Stirrup were arrested and charged, Mark Mariani's family invited journalists into their home. They stood together facing a wall of cameras to talk about Mark and how their lives had changed since he was so brutally killed.
All through this ordeal, I've lost many nights of sleep thinking about it.
I don't consider them men to beat up one person who's underweight and can't even defend himself.
If I know my son, he would have called for Mom, Dad, Kathy, and his brothers to have some help.
This was nothing more than pure evil at work. And what really saddens us is that he died alone in a parking lot and we couldn't be with him.
When Mark passed away, he took him away. He wouldn't let me go and hold and just comfort and hold. He wouldn't let us do that.
They took some solace in knowing the accused killers would face the justice system.
I think there are two striking things about the case. One was that Mark Mariani was totally unknown to these people. They had absolutely no reason to become angry with him or to have a grudge against him. And the other thing was just the savagery of the beating. The best pieces of evidence we had were the trace evidence and the intercepted communications.
Reitmeyer and Stirrup were supposed to stand trial together in March of 2013, 2.5 years after Mark was killed. But given Stirrup's admissions in the undercover operations, he made a last-minute plea.
Guilty plea today in the death of a 47-year-old Calgary man more than 2 years ago.
That plea took Mariani's family by complete surprise. They were prepared for a lengthy second-degree murder trial. But today, Tyler Stirrup admitting to the unprovoked beating death of Mark Mariani.
It was a shock that this turned around like it did today.
It was a random attack. Stirrup and another man repeatedly kicking and stomping Mariani. He died of severe head injuries. Today, Stirrup, the former white supremacist, addressing the court and offering an apology to the family.
The only thing that he offered, and as I indicated to the court, is that this was senseless. It was unfortunate. If he could turn back the clock, he would.
I want to believe it. I want to accept it. I want to have faith in humanity, but I've lost some of that faith.
The Mariani family providing victim impact statements to the court today, describing Mark as a kind and tender heart, saying they would not even wish this kind of a loss on Tyler Stirrup himself. Stirrup was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 10 years. The trial for the second man accused of this murder, Robert Reitmeyer, is scheduled to begin in the fall. Stirrup later appealed his sentence, but it was dismissed. Then, in November of 2013, just over 3 years after Mark's death, Robert Reitmeyer stood trial in front of a jury. It's believed that this was a completely unprovoked attack. The Crown outlining its case today to the 12-person jury made up of 9 women and 3 men. It will be up to that jury to decide if Robert Reitmeyer is guilty of second-degree murder.
The worst day of our life was 3 years ago. And today's the second worst day because we have to start this all over again. We just still don't know why. We want answers why Mark had to die that day. The Mariani family told us they plan to come to court for every day of the trial. They want to ensure that justice is served. The trial is expected to last 3 weeks.
The evidence against Mr. Reitmeyer really boiled down to 4 things. One was we could prove that he lived in the vicinity of where the murder took place. We could prove because of a statement that he made that he had painted the graffiti that was at the location where Mr. Mariani died. And because there was a red stain on Mr. Mariani's jacket, we could prove that he had been in the area right around the time the graffiti had been painted, because it appeared that this had smudged off the wall. And then there was a black smudge on the wall, which suggested someone had used a kicking motion, and the material from that smudge matched material that was obtained from boots seized from Mr. Reitmeyer. And then finally, and most importantly, we had private communications between he and Mr. Stirrup that were intercepted. And those did not involve direct confessions, but they certainly indicated the comments of someone who was well aware of the details of the crime and was afraid they were going to be charged for that crime.
Yeah, the whole nightmare will be in jail for the rest of my life. I'm not gonna hate God. I just look at the window somewhere. I'm waiting for every minute of the day. My daughter's gonna come fucking kick down.
The prosecution was not allowed to talk about Reitmeyer's association with white power groups or refer to his countless tattoos.
He was so heavily tattooed, there was no way that Mr. Reitmeyer could have hidden all of his tattoos, but he did try to hide some of them with high collars and things of that sort. But he had the SS tattoo on his cheek, and there was really nothing he could do about that. Now, we didn't comment on that at all, but we knew the jury would be looking at those things.
Today, the Crown pointed to multiple conversations between Robert Reitmeyer and Tyler Stirrup. The intercepted conversations were played during the trial, including this conversation that was recorded 8 months after Mariani's death.
Yeah. Oh, I'm famously manslaughter at a worst.
Yeah, they're telling me second degree, but...
Yeah, but they was straight up lying. They was straight up with the worst possible thing. It always gets knocked down a bunch.
Yeah. Let's go and get knocked down for a second.
Today, the jury heard from the defense. In closing arguments, Reitmeyer's lawyer claimed there is no compelling evidence that could convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Reitmeyer was at the scene or involved in the attack on Mariani.
The jury decided that the Crown had proven that Mr. Reitmeyer was an active participant in the murder of Mr. Mariani. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. His parole ineligibility was set at 13 years.
Reitmeyer appealed both his conviction and sentence. Both were dismissed. The Court of Appeal described the crime as a murderous assault of a defenseless person by two strangers simply for the fun of it.
Yeah, I think the randomness really struck everyone involved. Usually it may not be a sensible motive. It may be fueled by alcohol or something like that. But here, we didn't have any motive.
Not long after the court process finished, Mark's mother passed away.
I think that's what killed her. I think that's why she died. She couldn't understand, and she couldn't let go, and the pain was too much. And I see it in my siblings, and my nephews, and my niece, my brother-in-law. I see it. I see the pain, and I see how it's affecting them, and I see how, whether they admit it or not, I can see the pain. And it ages you, and it turns a bright spirit into less.
Now, almost 15 years after Mark Mariani was murdered, both of his killers are eligible for parole.
I think Stirrup is just violent by nature, but I get the feeling that he's kind of a follower and doesn't really understand what he's doing or how he's doing it, even though he does. The thing with Reitmeyer is that he's the mastermind. He's the conniving one. He's the smarter of the two, I think. This is evil, hatred, and pure just violence at its most disgusting.
He murdered my uncle in cold blood in the most brutal way possible. So why does he get to have a second chance? And he's gonna have a second chance to potentially harm someone else.
It's disgusting. Deep down to the core of who they are is terrible. Their belief system is just full of hate. My fear is if they get out, that they'll try and track us down and find us, or they might just pass some poor innocent person on the side of the road and victimize them.
Tyler Stirrup was eligible to apply for day parole in 2018, but so far hasn't sought release. In January of 2025, the Parole Board of Canada granted Robert Reitmeyer a 60-day unescorted temporary absence and stated, quote, he would not present an undue risk to attend a program 4 days a week. Reitmeyer said in his free time, he plans to work out and experience Victoria. The Mariani family does not support the leave. They still struggle with the devastating loss, but try to focus on keeping Mark's memory alive. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.
This program is rated 14+ and contains scenes of violence and mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
The 5 Point Generals are viewed as one of the biggest threats in the GTA at that time.
There was a number of shootings that were attributed to the 5 Point Generals and their members within a very short period of time.
With that escalation of that kind of gun violence, we were looking for where these guns are coming from, who was bringing these guns in. It took a wiretap of this magnitude and significance to take these individuals out.
So we're listening, we're watching.
On May 23rd, there was calls coming that there was something coming across the border.
Wait a minute. Well, stop. How much did they get? 60, right?
Like the stage was set for them to acquire a large shipment of guns, and we were set to intercept it. He reverses into the driveway. Someone unknown to us opens the trunk, takes a large package out, a heavy package, puts it in the back. We do a high-risk vehicle stop of a vehicle and bringing his vehicle to a halt.
At the time, was the biggest firearm seizure in the history of the Toronto Police.
Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. In Canada's largest city, one of the biggest threats to public safety is the escalating gang violence that has turned the streets into battlegrounds. Deadly force is now the preferred method to settle scores, and innocent bystanders are often paying the price. Now, to stop the flow of illegal guns from across the U.S. border, police are fighting back, working to infiltrate the street gangs before more lives are lost. Here now is Karen Lieberman with The Hand Behind the Gun.
Weston Road and Lawrence Avenue in Toronto's West End. The sounds of a busy, vibrant community at work and at play. But lately, these streets have been shattered by different sounds.
One male was armed with a sawed-off shotgun, while the other male was in possession of a handgun. They were only in the store for 5 seconds. It was a frenzied attack. They just opened fire in the direction of the table with total disregard for the safety of anybody in the store.
We quickly ran down the street. I was able to see that they were at least pumping his chest to try to revive him. When we got to the hospital, they said that he was already gone.
I miss my baby. My baby was a good boy.
Gerald Hagley was just 17 years old. Shot while out for late-night pizza with friends.
A survivor of gun violence, they transformed our beloved teenager on the brink of his manhood from a living, breathing person to a statistic.
It's been an epidemic surging in Toronto since 2005, the year of the gun.
There's definitely there's a murder here.
"18-year-old Eamon Beckles was gunned down by the front doors of this North Etobicoke church while attending his best friend Jamal Hemming's funeral. The 17-year-old had also been shot to death a week earlier.
A shocked congregation watches paramedics lift Eamon Beckles into an ambulance alongside his best friend's hearse.
The question I need to ask, how many more victims are we going to have until it's going to stop? If we stand up and we say no more, the gangsters are going to have to hear it. They can't hide behind the guns. They can't hide behind the silence, because we as a people are not going to let them hide any longer.
Fast forward to 2018. Gun and gang-related homicides in Toronto have almost doubled in the last 5 years.
Right here in this area, I would say this is the core of the 5PG territory, their drug turf. And there's been numerous shootings and numerous homicides right here on these streets, and many of them are directly related to the 5PG.
The 5 Point Generals, Police intelligence have been investigating them for months.
The 5PG were responsible for at least 4 murders, 10 attempted murders, I think it was 69 robberies.
And detectives fear the violence is escalating.
There was a number of shootings that were attributed to the 5 Point Generals and their members within a very short period of time. There were some retaliations going back and forth between different gangs in the city. They were getting out of control.
Along with the escalation of violence in the street is the constant intimidation through social media and the bragging and postings of gang symbols and their tattoos and flashing their money and their weapons and the fueling of the conflict through music videos.
Fresh out of jail, back in the game like Vic.
They did have a hierarchy. I would say Joe Dawkins was at the top of that list. This group shared in their resources, their profits, and also their weapons. We identified that there was 145 guns seized from this particular group of their associates.
With that escalation of that kind of gun violence, we were looking for where these guns are coming from, who is bringing these guns in.
There's potential for being live calls of where the shootings are about to occur. That's my.
The Guns and Gangs Major Project Section launches Project Patton.
In February of 2018, we were granted a authorization to intercept private communications of 91 named persons.
Once we start going live right off the start, who are we going to target?
When we do our initial wiretap authorization, we look to identify the back ends, who's supplying drugs, who's supplying the firearms to our organization.
In a covert location, they're about to infiltrate this dangerous gang's world.
Once we flip the switch, once we go live, there is no easing into it. Anything could happen on day one.
I was one of the lead investigators in the wire room. Our job is to direct surveillance, listen to intercepts as they come in.
Yo, yeah.
We end up listening to about 30 lines at a time, but some people can have multiple phones.
Is that what? It's a mixture of things.
We're getting thousands of calls a day.
Investigators are hearing the information. The surveillance team receives the information and we become the eyes of the project, and we're being directed towards the violence, towards the people who are committing the violence.
Andrew, he was driving down the street and all of a sudden he calls into the wire room. He says, I'm hearing shots being fired. I'm not sure where they're coming from.
I pull up to this light, and as I'm sitting here at 5:30 in the evening, gunshots go off. Pedestrians on this side of the street, pedestrians on that side of the street, they're running northbound, they're running eastbound. Honestly, pandemonium out here. I call the wire room, and almost immediately it's one of our targets on the line who's been shooting into traffic. We're able to arrest him and seize the firearm he actually used in that shooting.
They take down violent crime, but want to uncover who is putting guns into hands.
We started intercepting communications of certain individuals. One of them was Bill Allison. Bill Allison was an affiliate of many of these 5 Point Generals.
So what time
He's speaking to a male in Florida. He was referring to as Biggs.
One Japanese on right now.
This group spoke patois.
Something completely different. You understand?
It was a very hard patois, very difficult to even understand.
Pick up the Irish much there.
There was coded language used. There's different terms for guns, for drugs, for money.
They listen into a call from a car. A meeting is going down between Allison and an unknown male.
Come, make a right, Paul Lawrence. I'm meeting the shoppers. All right, cool.
Something that had a criminal element to it. And at that point, so I contacted Detective Steinwell, said, we need to see this meet. We need to identify who Mr. Allison is meeting with, and advised him that we believe this transaction is going to be down at the shops at Don Mills.
So our surveillance team sets up in that area, and we're waiting for somebody, and we're not sure who it is. So we race to this area, and we actually find them in the parking lot. They acknowledge each other, and then they follow each other in tandem through the lights and down the Donway, and both vehicles then turn down this driveway.
Next to these high-rise condos.
Next to these high-rise condos, and one vehicle in front of the other. Both get out, have brief conversation, and the male goes to the trunk of his minivan and takes out a package. He gives it to Bill Allison, he puts it in his vehicle, and I observe all of that.
Detectives follow a man not known to them before.
He pulls into his driveway, and from his truck he pulls out several boxes of mangoes and puts them in his garage.
At that point is how we identified Harris Poyser in this criminal organization.
They later hear what was in that package.
The one them give you, him have way prettiest than that man. And come one there. Okay, all right.
What we believe and know now is that there was a firearm transaction in between the shops of Don Mills.
As the investigation into this group gathers steam, we realize that these firearms are coming from the United States, and they're going to go directly to the streets of Toronto into the hands of criminals.
There's been an uptick in gun violence in Toronto's West End, and police are zeroing in on a supply pipeline for a violent gang. Steps away from a busy shopping plaza, they observe a meeting that pays off.
Harris Poyser met with Bill Allison that day, and there's clearly an exchange on that day. It's like, wow, we have a gun trafficking right off the start like this. How big is this?
They hear that the firearm was arranged by someone across the border.
And give us the victory again and again.
Who appears to be singing a day after the delivery.
We intercepted Biggs. He had a Florida phone number under a false name. This was a subject that was completely unknown to us.
Hello? Yeah.
You could tell that he was very skilled at what he was doing as far as criminal activity, and this was not his first rodeo.
Who get them paper? Momsy. Ready. Momsy.
In a three-way call, they hear Biggs arrange another meeting with someone by the name of Mumsy.
The intercept came in, and it was clear that Bill Allison was going to meet Mumsy, and there was going to be an exchange of money, but also an exchange of information.
So that Queen and 50? Yeah.
Yeah, Queen and 50 me there. I put this big. Where you there?
Not that far from there. That's why I'm asking you. All right, give me 5 minutes. All right? Yeah. Okay.
The observations were made in a grocery store parking lot. That's where they ended up meeting up. She was parked. Bill Allison pulls into the parking lot, parks close to her. He goes over and meets with her, provides her with a bundle, and then she left the location.
We didn't think Mumsy's role was that big other than being the recipient of potentially money or whatever Allison had given her. We believe it was money because looking back at it, it was a gun on that day that Harris Poyser gave to Bill Allison.
Harris Poyser, on the other hand, becomes a big target in this investigation.
When we first identified Harris Poyser, he wasn't our typical gun trafficker. He was an older man, he had a family, he had a normal job. I recall it was importing fruit from Jamaica. Once we started listening to Harris Poyser, it opened up the big picture.
Good morning, sir. Pleasant good morning, sir. How you doing? I'm good. So we have about 30 depending where right now.
So in May of 2018, information was given to us from the wire room that Harris Poyser was meeting 2 of his associates in this parking lot. And they met roughly in this area here. Harris Poyser parked his vehicle in this spot. One male comes up, very young looking, sunglasses, approaches Harris Poyser, and we think, who is this? We have a second male approach. They all seem to be deep in conversation.
Kareem Lewis was identified through facial recognition. So we had such a good face shot of him from the surveillance video. We were able to get that matched to an arrest photo that we already had on file with the service. And then Kamar Cunningham was identified through the vehicle that he arrived in.
We weren't sure what their roles were in this group. We really weren't sure what Harris Poyser's role was in this group, but we were going to find out very shortly. That day, later, Harris Poyser went on his way, and Kamar Cunningham and Kareem Lewis drove to Cornwall.
A border town in eastern Ontario, around 100 kilometers from the capital, Ottawa.
They went to a house on 515 Oliver Lane in Cornwall. And not much on the lines about any pickups, any guns, any drugs coming back, or was it money going to the person at Cornwall?
They pulled on a street where we couldn't get any observations, and then they drove back directly on the highway.
At this point, we didn't know what was exchanged, if anything at all. We followed the targets back to the city.
What we didn't realize at that time, there was an exchange of guns that was coming back.
The very next day, Kamar Cunningham met Harris Poyser again in this lot, went closer towards this World's Gym.
They were sitting in their vehicles. There was a door-to-door meeting, but unfortunately our surveillance team wasn't set up in a position to observe that.
And although information was coming from the wire room that there was possibly a firearm transaction, we were unable to see anything change hands.
We were never able to make the call to do a takedown at that moment.
From that meet, we don't follow Poyser, we follow Kamar. Kamar Cunningham was then followed back to Mississauga, where he was seen carrying a bag from his vehicle and meeting people in and around his condo.
A call tells them what they missed.
They discussed how the guns weren't good guns.
Which one did I load? The old one, you want one rusty one, come on, brother, you know? That million load?
Some of them were rusted, some were broken.
Everybody load, brother. No, man, one old rusty one, man. You know what? You know that was a mistake, one, but it can load.
It wasn't until later that Intercepts told us that 30 firearms exchanged hands that day.
What was scary is that Kamar Cunningham was able to get rid of those guns so quick. And they weren't good guns. They were rusted. They were just selling them off and people were taking them.
He's the one who delivers it to the streets.
Just weeks into the wiretap, they've discovered a cell that's bringing guns to Toronto, and they've just missed a big shipment.
We were frustrated, we were a bit upset, but it wasn't long after that we started to receive information that there would be a larger load coming in from Cornwall.
We determined at that point in time there was not going to be another shipment making it through. So we were going to do everything we could possibly do to ensure the second shipment was not making it into Toronto.
What they don't realize is that the next shipment will be the biggest in Toronto police history. That is, if they catch it.
Welcome back. Just weeks into a massive wiretap investigation, Toronto police are dropped into an international smuggling ring. They are rushing to connect the dots before the pipeline brings more guns over the border. We now return to Karen Lieberman with the hand behind the gun.
Toronto's Guns and Gangs team is on high alert for another shipment of guns.
At that point, we didn't know what was going on in Florida, how these guns were getting up here. We knew nothing other than the fact they showed up on the other side of the border in Cornwall.
Detectives ask alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents to track down a target with a Florida phone number.
We hear that we have an individual who goes by Biggs. Did not know his true identity, and we were able to determine that he had multiple driver's licenses and a couple of different passports in alternative identities.
They've tracked him all across the state of Florida with no luck.
On May 23rd, there was calls coming that there was something coming across the border, that Biggs had set it up down there.
Wait a minute. Well, stop. How much did they get? 60, right?
In Toronto, they also witness a flurry of activity.
So we're listening, we're watching, we're taking every little detail into consideration so we don't miss this shipment. While Harris Poyser jostles around his mangoes, he's also looks to be animated when he's talking to Kamar.
And right away we determined that Poyser was going to go to Cornwall and Kareem Lewis was going to go to Cornwall with him. And we had 2 surveillance teams on.
They've trailed cars up this route before, but never like this. A transport crash has caused the highway to ignite on fire.
On that day, all traffic, the 401 was closed, all traffic was diverted off of the highway, and so it was very challenging to get him to Cornwall.
While stuck in traffic,
Then it moved from 18.
they rely on the wire room or listening into their targets in hopes of finding out what they're picking up.
I don't know. Yeah, I think 60, yeah.
And they talked 60 and 100, you're still thinking kilos of coke. So on that date, was it the guns coming across or was it drugs coming across?
We follow Harris Poyser to Cornwall. We set up observations there and we're waiting. We're waiting to see what Travis is hearing in the wire room.
Trust me. We're supposed to done already, because they're pretty.
Yeah.
Everyone.
And at one point, Harris Poyser says very quickly at the end of the conversation, he says to Biggs, how are they wrapped? Are they wrapped nicely?
You put them in a plastic bag each?
No, man, they must scotch up them wrap the right way. Them wrap up.
Very good.
His response to that was, no, they're all packaged very softly so they don't scratch. At that point, I realized it was guns and not drugs. No one cares about scratching kilos of cocaine. I've never heard that term. But scratching new guns, that would devalue them. So at that point, I was confident there was 60 guns.
The stage was set for them to acquire a large shipment of guns, and we were set to intercept it. When they get to Cornwall, Kareem Lewis goes to a rest stop of the highway, and he waits for Poyser.
Harris Poyser was observed to go to 515 Oliver Lane.
He reverses into the driveway. Someone unknown to us opens the trunk. It goes to the garage, takes a large package out, heavy package, puts it in the back, goes back to the garage. I relay that information to Travis Clark, and he corroborates the information that he's receiving on the wiretap.
He said there were very heavy bags, just 2 of them, that went into Mr. Poyser's vehicle.
Poyser never gets out of the car. The trunk is closed, and then he turns back the exact same way he came.
After Poyser picked up the guns, Poyser was calling Lewis to meet up and do the exchange, but Lewis didn't answer the phone because he was asleep. And because we had our surveillance team watching him, so we knew he was asleep, and that's why he wasn't answering the phone.
The surveillance team in the plane followed Poyser out of the area.
When he gets onto the road that leads to the highway, my thoughts were, we cannot let him get onto the highway. And from there, Travis Clark is confident enough to tell us to stop the vehicle, arrest Poyser for possession of firearm, and seize what is in the trunk.
He had a full grasp of the moment, as well as I did, and the chance we're about to take. And when I see that word takedown, I'm putting one of my best friends, Andrew Steinwall, in a precarious position, but I'm asking him to do his job. They have to take this individual in custody. They have a natural fight or flight mentality like most humans do, and most of them are armed. It's a very dangerous situation to be in. Then I hung up the phone and I sat and waited. And at that point, it was just quiet. It was quiet.
Adrenaline is pumping at this time. We're hoping that, we were right. We're hoping that what we are seeing are firearms in there, and we're hoping that the information that Travis Clark received was accurate. We do a high-risk vehicle stop of a vehicle by surrounding his vehicle with other vehicles and bringing his vehicle to a halt. Harris Poyser is taken out without any incident, and I go directly to the trunk.
The room was intense, and you could hear a pin drop waiting for that call from the team and Detective Steinwall to let us know exactly what they found.
And the call came in, and I could hear it in his voice. I've known Andrew, we've worked together our entire careers. I could hear it in his voice.
We pop the trunk, and there is 2 duvet cases, plastic, see-through, and you could tell that these would be ideal for putting firearms in and not scratching them. And he said, "How many are in there?" I said, a lot. Like, a lot. At first, I think I told him, I feel 10, I feel like 15. I think there's 30 in this one. I think Travis said to me, "Are you lying? Are you lying?" I'm not lying. There's not 5, there's 10, there's 20, there's 30 in each bag.
And at that moment, it's just like the stress of getting this, and actually massive part of our goal was to stop the flow of guns into this community.
I stayed with the firearms, and while I was waiting for Cornwall Police, I proved the firearm safe on the hood of the vehicle. It actually looked very pretty on the top of the hood, top of the police car. I was thinking about what Travis had told me, that they said these are pretty guns, and they look pretty. Like, there was pink guns and camouflage and light blue.
Those pictures were sent back to the wire room, and it was a pure celebration.
There were a lot of high fives that day.
It was the single largest seizure of guns in Toronto police history.
I can advise that 60 of the handguns that you see before you today were obtained in a single seizure from an individual who was intending on delivering them to high-ranking individuals within the 5 Point Generals hierarchy. The guns were destined to become crime guns in Toronto and the GTA.
They described in the intercepts as pretty little things. They were pink camouflage. They were small. They had extended magazines that could hold, illegally, hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition in that gun. So when you get them all laid out with the colors, colors of the rainbow, they were pretty little guns.
They're so perfect for carrying on your person. They're almost meant to match your outfit, to show your friends. Like, these are guns that can be easily concealed and all in the hands of criminals. They are so dangerous.
I don't know how many homicides we stopped. I don't know how many shootings we stopped. How many innocent victims were saved from 60 guns being out there.
But the big question on their minds, is there more to come?
From the time the guns were seized, law enforcement scrambling, trying to figure out where did these guns come from. Most importantly, are there more that we missed that are going to reach the destination?
They uncover that this was one of 2 shipments.
They had 40 guns apparently that were coming again. There was indications they were in New York. No idea where they were in New York.
We suspect what happened is once we seized the 60 guns in Cornwall, they shut down operations, and those 40 guns never made it back into Canada, and we never had any further intercepts to indicate that those guns made it into Canada.
There is little chatter on the lines.
We were only intercepting Biggs through his conversations with Bill Allison and with Harris Poyser at that point. So once we arrest those individuals, it's quiet. It's quiet.
At this time, we still didn't know who Biggs was. Obviously, he's the central figure who's arranging all of this.
So after the guns are seized, we begin the task of identifying the firearms through their serial numbers and determining where they were purchased and who purchased them.
I was a special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, commonly known as ATF. The ATF became part of the investigation immediately to help facilitate and coordinate the traces. ATF has to call the manufacturer, who then calls the importer or wholesaler, who then calls the individual dealer, and the individual dealer maintains a paper record of that purchase.
They trace the guns back to Central Florida.
The Central Florida Gun Show is at the Central Florida Fairgrounds, and it's held quarterly. Vendors, which are normally federal firearms licensees, they set up a table and they're able to sell to the public. Over 60 of them were bought in that location.
And they discover they were bought by just 3 people.
We go to the gun dealer and we say, okay, can you just give us everything you have from the purchase? If you have surveillance video, we wanted to know, were there other people present during the purchase? In this case, the purchasers acted alone. They bought 10, 15 guns. The exchange occurred just like any other, and they walked away. So what we found was that the purchasers were not what you would call like career criminals. However, they were exploited and used by career criminals to put their name on firearms. We had 3 different people, seemingly unrelated. The fact that they didn't know each other and they told a consistent story and they appeared coached on how to potentially evade prosecution and evade capture, it showed us the level of sophistication within this organization.
So combined, those 3 individuals ended up purchasing 58 of the 60 handguns within 4 days of them arriving in Canada.
It's a very short time to crime. The time it takes for an illegal gun to end up in the hands of a criminal.
And we're used to seeing hundreds of days, sometimes years, on the time to crime stats when we seize a gun, but in this case, we knew it was a direct line from Florida up to Canada through Cornwall.
They don't believe they came through a border checkpoint.
Through our investigation, we determined that they came north into the border on the U.S. side, at which point they utilized a male known to us only as Apache to bring them through the Akwesasne Reserve just in the Cornwall area.
We had an idea of who he was. There was never enough evidence to identify who he was.
They are still trying to put a face to the man they think is calling the shots.
Biggs was the one telling how many were going. He was coordinating with Allison. He was coordinating with Apache. He was coordinating with Harris Poyser.
For somebody to disguise who they are, where they live, continually move around multiple states in the U.S., multiple countries, through multiple identities, as far as level of criminal, he would be somebody who's at the top.
After a 9-month investigation, they make the call to take down the 5 Point Generals.
We were about to kick in the doors of 49 residences, and we needed the assistance of 21 tactical teams to do so. And our goal was to arrest the 60 suspected gang members and their associates.
The magnitude of the takedown, given there's so many to arrest, the violence of these individuals, the guns that we expected still to be in their residences.
As they execute warrants, the gun tally grows.
In the basement of one of the residences, we found a firearm manufacturing and modification operation.
So they were building basically Frankenstein guns and then distributing them out onto the street. And we seized, I think, 5 of them during our investigation for Project Patton, and then shut down this individual that was building them.
There was 78 firearms seized at the end of the project. I believe there was 93 people arrested and charged.
They arrest all but one of the suspects they've identified in this gun smuggling ring.
When we do our takedown, Kamar Cunningham had actually fled the country. He was out of the country in Jamaica, so we put out a warrant for his arrest.
All right, just have a seat on that wall there.
They bring in one of their very first targets, Bill Allison, for questioning.
Okay, who's Biggs?
Biggs is a guy in the States.
They're closing in on the man who they believe is the architect of a firearms pipeline.
Welcome back. In a major crackdown, police arrested nearly 100 alleged associates of a violent street gang, bringing a wave of hope to the city's fight against crime. Well, authorities are now focused on tracking down the mastermind behind the illegal flow of firearms crossing the border. Here now is Karen Lieberman with a conclusion of the hand behind the gun.
He'll be one of the first lines up. He's probably going to have multiple.
Detectives hope to finally put a face on the man they say is at the top of an international firearms smuggling ring.
There's a lot of people that were arrested this morning. We're alleging that you're part of a criminal organization, a larger group.
They've arrested Bill Allison, the target they followed to the shops at Don Mills and witnessed receive a package from Harris Poyser, which they later heard was a firearm.
Have you come into possession of firearms in the last 3 months by anybody on the street or anything like that? No. So you don't sell firearms or anything like that?
I don't sell firearms.
What if I told you we've been listening to you for 3 months on your phone?
You've been listening to my phone for 3 months?
Yeah.
Maybe possible.
Yeah?
Yo! Yeah.
They play back the phone intercepts.
Hello? Hello? Yo, where you at, Jeff?
They want to know who the other voice is, the man he was speaking with.
What's his actual name?
I don't know his actual name. I know his mom.
And it just became more clear that he was the son of Barbara Booth.
Surveillance teams identified Barbara Booth, who they knew as Mumsy, after she allegedly met with Bill Allison in this grocery store parking lot.
Mumsy got arrested too?
That's his mom, but I don't know.
Yeah, she's here.
She's here.
Because you gave her money and to send for him. What do you think Mumsy's going to tell us? What the money's for?
I don't know.
Don't know. Hello.
Hey.
Nice to see you. It's Barbara.
Yeah.
And last name Booth.
Yes.
Does the name Biggs mean anything to you?
Huh?
Does the nickname Biggs mean anything to you?
Biggs? No.
Never heard that name before?
She has 2 older sons. One piques their interest.
Okay, what's his name?
Ernest Wilson.
Ernest Wilson, okay. When's the last time you spoke to him?
I don't remember.
What was your purpose of meeting Allison that day?
I don't remember. No.
Okay.
Barbara Booth denies meeting and receiving money from Bill Allison.
If you were to receive a sum of money, $4,600 at the food base, that's something you would remember?
How much?
$4,600.
No, sir. Money? No, sir.
On June 21st, when we had Barbara Booth, Mumsy, in a room and the other members of this network, ultimately we were able to discover that Ernest Wilson was Barbara Booth's son and also believed to be Biggs at that time.
Police quickly discover Ernest Wilson is wanted.
Ernest Wilson was a fugitive. He was arrested for possession for the purpose of trafficking cocaine. I believe he fled. He didn't appear in court after he was released, and he fled at that time.
Ernest Wilson was a Canadian citizen that was hiding out in the States and trying to evade arrest in our country.
When Toronto police find out, they let us know the marshals down in South Florida were tracking Ernest Wilson.
As the manhunt intensifies across the border, Kamar Cunningham is captured in Toronto.
He flew back into Pearson Airport, and when he arrived at Pearson, he ended up getting identified and arrested.
The Crown prepares to prosecute this cell, but all will not be brought to trial. Shortly after arrest, Kareem Lewis took his own life. Detectives get a call about Ernest Wilson.
The marshals had a location for Wilson in Coconut Creek, Florida, and they were looking to apprehend him. They tracked him down to a certain apartment complex, but they were too late. He had been murdered, killed via a gunshot wound, about 4 hours before the marshals located him. We feel that he was killed due to an ongoing dispute that he had with others based on the life he was living.
I am talking just in general. I am not no parents.
Barbara Booth, she was charged with a very minor offense in the overall scope of the criminal organization. So at that time, the decision was made to drop the charge on her, and then she was able to travel to the U.S. to collect her son's body.
In 2020, the trial is set to go remotely. Just months before, Harris Poyser pleads guilty to firearms importation and trafficking, leaving Bill Allison and Kamar Cunningham to stand.
There's a lot of elements to that, to meet and prove to a judge that they were knowingly and actively a part of this criminal organization.
They're supposed to done already, because they're pretty. Yeah, everyone.
Based on these complex investigations, it is a real challenge for the Crown attorneys. Hours and hours of surveillance video, hundreds of thousands of wiretap intercepts.
Yeah, we're supposed to get 62.5, but him have $500 for me.
There's no better evidence than listening to the accused with his own voice talk about their own criminal activities.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, the wiretap produced the best evidence possible to result in numerous convictions.
Harris Poyser is sentenced to 15 years for firearms importation and trafficking.
Bill Allison was charged in relation to the firearms trafficking. He received a sentence of 6 years and 8 months.
Kamar Cunningham was convicted of firearms trafficking, but he was not there to hear his sentence.
Even though he had been convicted and was facing a fairly serious sentence, they released him on bail again, and then very short time before his actual sentencing date, he was reported missing by his sureties, the people that were supposed to be responsible for monitoring his activities, and he has not been seen since. So I applied to have him added to the BOLO program. They agreed, and there's currently a $50,000 reward for his arrest.
Kamar Cunningham may or may not be pulling the trigger, but he is definitely putting the firearms into hands of people who would pull the trigger. How important is apprehending Kamar Cunningham? Extremely important for the safety of the citizens of Toronto.
At the end of the project, they stopped 78 guns from making it to the streets.
We take Project Patton, from what we saw, stopped that flow of guns. There's a lot for an illegal firearm to get from a gun show in Orlando into the hands of an individual in Toronto who's going to do a homicide. There's a lot of people in control, and there's a lot of people responsible for bringing those guns here to Canada, and they're responsible for those shootings that occur on the street. It took a wiretap of this magnitude and significance to take these individuals out.
Immediately after Project Patton, we saw a noted decrease in the level of violence, especially the level of gun violence in this area. At that time, they were one of the greatest risks to public safety in our city, and we did our best to dismantle them.
Despite the success of takedowns like Project Patton and the thousands of illegal weapons seized each year, crime guns continue to flow into Canada. Police say every gun on the street matters. It only takes one round to devastate a community. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart.
Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.